Good evening and welcome to the January 14th, 2020 Tri-Board meeting. We have the school committee here tonight, we have the select board here tonight, and we have finance committee here tonight. So welcome and thank you everybody for coming tonight. Thank you, Dr. Cummings, for arranging the meeting space for us. We have a very tight schedule tonight and a lot of people here tonight, and we're going to get a lot of information. Tim has presented some great, prepared some great information for all of us. So we know there's going to be a lot of questions tonight. We're probably not going to be able to answer all the questions. School committee does have a meeting starting at 8 o'clock. We do have some presenters coming, so we're going to have to be mindful of the time tonight. So I do appreciate everybody coming out. Of course, we're going to be able to get to questions answered at another time. It just might not be tonight. So if you could be mindful of when you're asking a question, if it's a question somebody else has answered, and to keep focused on the topic that Tim has presented tonight would be helpful. So with that being said, and
Madam Chair, I just noticed that our state rep and our state senator are here. I don't know whether or not we want to recognize them while they're.
Sure. Hi, our state rep and state senator are here. Thank you. We also have a really great crowd today. I'd also really like to thank the Grafton citizens who have come out tonight to hear more information. It's great to see you. So thank you for coming. Before I start, do any of the chairs? Matt?
Madam Chair, can I just get 20 seconds? I'd like to thank the Select Board and the School Committee for inviting us to the meeting. We're obviously facing a challenging year ahead, and we look forward to collaborating with you, both the boards and committees, to help move the town forward. From what we've seen in the budget projections from last year and this year, there really are no surprises. Looking at Tim's projections, we're facing a significant expected budget shortfall, and we'll need to address this with either increased revenues or reductions in services. We look forward to working with all town departments to understand our options to increase revenue or reduce services. The budget process has already begun, and we have a lot of work to do. I hope we can quickly come to a decision on an override to help all departments prepare their budgets for multiple budget scenarios, potentially. And we look to the Select Board for your leadership on driving these decisions.
All right, thank
Thanks.
you. Jen, did you want to? No. No? All right, so Tim, we're going to turn it over to you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and much like we did 2 weeks ago in this venue with the superintendent, we talked about the needs for the school, and I thought what I'd do tonight is cover a couple things relative to the override that we passed in 14. I've been here since 2008 and managing all kinds of various issues relative to budgeting, mostly health insurance and trash, but we'll get into that in more detail. I'll just note from our financial team that Anita, our town accountant, is here, as well as Amy Perkins, our treasurer collector, and Mary Oliver, the assessor. Obviously, Becca's to my right, and all play an important role in managing the community's resources, make sure we spend compliant with what town meeting appropriates, and then comply with all state laws relative to procurement. So they're kind of our check and balance, as well as other state agencies, bond rating agencies, and so forth. So, having said that, thank you for coming. There may be particular questions that the group may pose to you that they'll stand at the ready to answer relative to debt as it relates to equalized valuation. A lot of this is not going to be new for folks. We knew in 14 when we passed the override for $3.5 million. 2.5 was going to the school department, and 1.5 was going to a road stabilization account. We've done 40 road projects since 2015 with that stabilization account. A lot of improvements have been made. We still need to make more. The magical thing about that particular 1.5 million, that capital stabilization can only be authorized to be levied in our tax bills by the select board. So it's an important point to remember as we get to the end of the presentation. I will tell you, when I started to go through this process, I started to think about what's the end, what's the goal? The goal is if we want to provide the level of services we think we need for town and school, we've exhausted everything imaginable, expense side and revenue side, and I'll get into the particulars when I hand out the document. The only way to do those things and to continue that is to do an override. There's no two ways about it. I wish there was. But I think I'm going to give you some concrete examples of things we've done to manage costs offset risk and put things outside of our sphere of influence. One Grafton Common, for example, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the old police station. Talk about 10 priority development sites that are at the ready to be developed as long as the market conditions are right. We've done zone changes to deal with those things, so I'll get into those particulars. So, as I said, in 14, there was probably a shortfall, 850,000, Jay, would you say? So we needed 850 for that fiscal year, and then the plan was to spend about $200,000 a year for every year thereafter of that excess levy. So it's important to note the levy's made up of the budget, which is set by town meeting. So I think that's, might be remedial for some folks, but I think it's important to note the town meeting controls what we all pay in taxes by what they vote for an appropriation from the levy. So I think it can't be understated enough. So our estimate at the time for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, using 200,000 of that levy of what was voted in the override, we were going to have in 2020, which is the fiscal year we're in, a $65,000 shortfall, 65 grand. We're obviously in the fiscal year, and we have a balanced budget. We have about 111,000 in excess levy right now. So that's due to free cash, not free cash, I'm sorry, it's due to excess levy due to new growth, which Mary could talk to that at length, but just to give you a parameter, we did an estimate 5 years ago to be 65 negative to get to 111. We did a pretty good job, right? We should all be very happy with the progress we've made in terms of managing that, making the commitment to the community to only budget and spend that amount of money. That's a big deal, because not a lot of communities get to pass an override. So when we do it and we manage it well, I think we need to celebrate it and recognize it. So during that time frame of that 5 years, our cost drivers were mostly health insurance. We made two big programmatic changes to health insurance, which I'll get into. The other thing in our estimates, we were looking at state aid growing between 3 and 5% when we did the override, thinking it should grow. The economy will eventually get better out of 2008. We're in 2014, it should be more robust. It's 1%. It's $100,000. It's not a lot of money. I say that with some agitation and disdain, but I will tell you that the state reps you and senator you recognized have worked diligently, not on general fund money, but project money and program money for the town of Grafton. This duo has, it's well over $1 million that you guys have brought to us for projects, from permitting software to the most recent project for Route 30, for the sewer project. So while we can't operate with the money you bring us, either in earmarks and grants, it does help us, perform our everyday function. So I appreciate that, and I want to say thank you for that. Communities do overrides mostly because 2.5, what's allowed under 2.5 will not keep up with general expenses of the budget. There was a year here where health insurance increased estimates and exposure for enrollment eclipsed the $900,000 we were allowed under new growth. So under Proposition 2.5, you get to grow the levy by 2.5%. There was 1 year, it was just under $900,000 of new money. Health insurance was about $900,000 increase. So that's what you're faced with. There's one cost item that can eclipse that number. So Prop 2.5, we can talk about, it shouldn't be here, we should get rid of it, we can abolish it. It's here. And the only way to deal with it is to do an override. There's no, like I said before, there's no two ways about it. But though that one cost driver can eclipse even what's allowed. So we have to balance the need of the community for its services and the ability for people to pay. So we put a lot of time and energy into the $3.5 million, and we put money into overlay and abatements, and we increased exemption levels. We try to protect the most vulnerable people in the community by doing those things when we did the override. We have to be aware of that now going forward as well. So I just say that up front. So the document that we have is going to give you a primer, if you will, on Proposition 2.5. It'll talk about all the new money we have for next fiscal year. I'll talk about the risks associated with some of those new dollars, because there's I'll talk about it now because I'm on it. It's 360,000 of that money comes from marijuana sales and taxation for marijuana. So that's a big number. I have 6 months to get a place in and up and running. They're working hard on Route 30 at the old Anzio's location to get up and operational in that spot, but it's risky, but it's in our estimate right now. So you can I only tell you that because there are risks to the revenue I'm even carrying for the 2.1 for all new money outside of an override. So the document also looks at how we compare to other communities. We look at income levels. We've talked about this at length relative to what the filed income taxes are for Grafton in the state of Massachusetts compared to other communities. Look at the average tax bill. We look at the value of a home versus other communities. We look at population versus other communities. We also have a section relative to how much we spend per capita for expenses and payroll. We are the lowest per capita expense for personnel for the municipal side of government. Police, fire, DPW, all those people included. And the average wage for union, non-police, non-fire is $45,000. That's our annual pay for those union employees. It's just they're in a bargaining unit. I have to negotiate with them, but that is not a good number to have as an average. So I'll just say that at the onset. Economic development, there's talk. We think we have a robust plan for 10 priority development sites. I'll take you through those and what that would mean if they were all to be developed. And as I mentioned earlier, we've done zone changes, and we stand at the ready for the market to bring forward a development that can yield probably $670 million of new growth. It's not money to us, but tax on that $670 million. Changes in operation. We'll cover budget categories, we'll cover debt, override logistics and impacts. If we're gonna start with the end in mind, we have to know that the cost and what that's going to be and how we compare to other communities relative to being attractive to other people to buy here and live here. And we think we can show that pretty well. We do a summit with staff for capital, we do it for operations. So there's a lot of asks that people make. They ask of Jay, fund this, fund that. We only have so much money. We can't fund things. So you may never see the items that I cut. So 21, by way of example, police chief wants 2 new cars. 21, to balance, chief's not getting 2 new cars. I hope he's not here, I hope he's not gonna shoot me in the, but, you know, it's just like these type of things, we have to make those reductions because we have other priorities that compete for the same dollars. So we do those summits. So those things are also in this document in terms of an overall need. And then we give a sample ballot and timing relative to an override if you were to consider one. And we know, and we've gone over this, I'll just make this point clear, town meeting appropriates money that the community votes to levy. So only the select board can put an override question to the voters, but only town meeting can appropriate that money. You do not need town meeting approval to put the ballot question before the voters. That's the real answer. So I just wanted to make that clear. So if Becca can take half and I'll let this half go this way. It's 15 pages. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm gonna try to cover it as best and as concisely as I can. I'm gonna let those go around so you can have them. If there's an extra one, we'll certainly pass that sometime. Not right now, and I didn't do this whiteboard. I know people say, oh, if you did it, but they would have to move. It's logistically, it's difficult to do. So I apologize to everybody behind me, but there's no best whiteboard.
Oh, wow.
So there should be extra. We made 35 copies, so if you have extras, pass them back if you could.
Tim, I've been told that it can be a little bit difficult to hear you. Can you maybe look at my board across?
Sure. All right, I'm gonna start from the beginning.
Please, though.
Does everybody have a copy in front of them?
Yes.
All right. So we titled the State of the Town. We did this in 2014 at the high school, the new high school after it was built in the cafeteria. So it's not, it's obviously revised with new numbers, things that I want you to pay attention to. There's a lot to digest here. But I talked about the new growth and I talked about what's allowed under Proposition 2.5. So next year in 2021, the allowance will be $980,000. Our estimated new growth for next year is $550,000. We did a little better this year. But what that means is the community has to invest $33 million in their houses and commercial property to get the yield of $550,000 of new growth. We've exceeded that this year by a landslide, both in personal property and in commercial, mostly due to Mary's work and her staff. So thank you for that. People are not happy about the valuation, but I might as well say it for you, that the value is market-driven. You know, $419,000 is the average value of a single-family house in Grafton. It's below what everybody else is when you get to the back of this book. Not everybody else, but it's in the middle. The value here is certainly far better than Shrewsbury or Westboro. And the income will be indicative of that as well. So the earned income is very, very robust in Grafton. The third paragraph deals with state aid, and again, I thank the senator and the state rep relative to the work they do for us, but that $100,000 increase in state aid, I think it's $12 million bucks, give or take, total annually to us. It's just not enough. So we try to do what we can. So the box that lays out the revenue, what the allowance is, the new growth, I just told you how we got to that, the state aid of 120, departmental revenue of $100,000 increase, mostly due to building inspection fees and motor vehicle excise tax estimates being higher than they are right now. And the marijuana host agreement fees, those are both taxes and the host agreements that we've signed. If they build and they're up and operational, you'll yield that 360 easily, but if they're not built, there is a risk. So I just want to caution people that I'm carrying it, but if we don't make it, it's another $300,000 we have to come up with. There are always caveats to this. Today, if you read the Boston Globe on Sunday, recycling problem in the country, it's been on the news. That, you know, I've never thought I would see a recycling video or a 60-minute article where they're saying, when in doubt, throw it out. I've never heard that saying before, but that's what we're getting towards. So we learned today that the city of Boston used to pay $700,000 to remove our recycled material. Last year it was $700,000. This year it's $5 million. So overnight, $700,000 to $5 million. Luckily, we have a long-standing contract with the Harvey where our recycling is included. That's going to expire in 2021. And now that the market has changed for recycling, there'll be a cost for recycling in 2021, or actually fiscal 22, because our contract ends in 21, that we'll have to figure out, are we gonna burn more, which is burning recycling, or are we gonna pay for the additional cost to recycle recyclable materials? So it's probably a $100,000 swing in the recycling sanitation budget. For that budget, I'll answer your question in 1 second. When I got here in 2008, it was over $1 million bucks. Today it's just under $1 million overall for trash. So to hold that line for that long is amazing. I think Doreen was a part of it. A lot of people came to a lot of meetings when we, you know, a lot of people said they would just rather burn their trash in their oven versus recycling and using green trash bags. The quality of the bags, notwithstanding, we'll deal with that. No, we will deal with that, but that's not part of our discussion now. But in terms of holding that cost and revenues to offset that steady, I think is amazing. Yes.
Just a quick question on the marijuana host agreements. You said build, but build by when in order to get that 360,000?
Well, they need to have sales, they need to have product, and they need to be built out. So the construction inside of the old Anzio's location on Route 30 has already begun, but they're getting a permit approval, and they also need a full building permit to do the work they need to do inside. So I don't know the exact timing. We are working with them on a water line across the street because we're on the road now, so we're coordinating that activity so they can do a sprinkler system.
Thank you.
So sometime between July 1st, 20 and June 30th, 21, they have to be up and running and
Yeah.
generate $360,000 worth
But
of revenue.
remember, we have 5 host agreements signed. We think 2 or 3 are viable. 2 are more viable than 3, but the next one is,
And this is based on 2?
it's based on 1.
On 1, okay.
So there's your 2.1 million. We looked at affordability as it relates to surrounding communities. So we have charts and graphs. The average single-family tax bill, $69.20 on average. $641 goes to debt service. It's important to note that our debt is most of it's excluded. But a lot of it right now, because of the sewer treatment plant, is funded with user fees and not with general fund or tax dollars. So the users pay that fee, and that we pay the debt service of almost $2 million a year for our debt service for the sewer department through user fees. So you can see where we end up for the average single tax bill. Oxford at the time didn't have their tax rate set. I don't know how they sent out bills, but they'll have to figure that out for themselves. In terms of reported income, we're in the top 3 out of 11 communities. So $923 million of filed income tax for the town of Grafton, almost $1 billion. Now, obviously, you have to do a lot of calculations relative to the number of households or per capita. But in terms of being affordable and being able to have elasticity to pay more in taxes if you were to do an override, we think the revenue is there. We think people have enough money, provided they vote for it. At the end of the day, they have to vote for it. So they'll make that determination, but on our first read of filed income tax data, we think people can afford it. And I said it before, we have to plan for it, and in this document, there is a plan to increase overlay and abatement to deal with the most vulnerable population in Grafton. So we have to build that in, because we have to pay for the folks who can't pay. Average single-family house is 383 for the average, and we're at 419. We covered that. We talked about our population, which is just really just a point of information. Economic development is something that I think we've been successful on, whether it's deferring the risk, getting things off of our books from insurance or maintenance costs or utility costs. 3 quick ones are the police station, South Grafton Library, 1 Grafton Common. Those are all things that we shipped off to other entities to deal with. And obviously, 1 Grafton Common, in terms of value and taxes, they have increased and paid more in taxes than they ever have. So economic development as a fundamental philosophy, there's 2 major things you can do to spur it. You can change zoning, which we've done on many areas, Pine Street, Route 30, the Bolac Plaza. We instituted a 43D expedited permitting for a lot of parcels, including the UPS parcel and Wyman Gordon. So in this building today, there are 7 on the wall downstairs of Grafton's priority development sites, and I did not print out all of them, but I will pass this one around. It gives the marketing plan, if you will, for the parcels. And what's important about the ones that you'll see, UPS, for example, while they haven't pulled the permit, they closed last November. Their estimated investment was $180 million when they finally build. Their value a year ago for the property itself, for the 96 acres, was $752,000. Their latest tax bill was based on conversation with the Department of Revenue, and the value is $3 million today. So in terms of growing incremental community, CIPC, commercial industrial property tax, we're moving the needle ever so slightly, but still moving it in the right direction. There's 81 acres at Grafton Science Park. It's owned by Tufts. They are aggressive in marketing it. I want them to be more aggressive in marketing it. But there's 81 acres and 660,000 square feet of pre-approved development space there. The yield there for investment is between 150 and 250 million. The Fisherville Mill site, which has been ongoing from before I got here, is at 60 Main Street in South Grafton, 16 acres. That fully developed should be between 30 and 50 million in investment. Wyman Gordon, we just learned of this, and that's why we changed the zone to expedited permitting. The front parcel will be sold off. I cannot tell you when. I cannot control or move them fast enough, but we're very interested for them to build something that's meaningful. But that's at least a $100 million investment, not knowing what it is. So I'm kind of guessing on what other blended items are in all these other development activities, and that's how I get the $100 million, if you were wondering. Mass development site at 124 Westboro Road, which we have the grant from MassWorks to put the sewer line in. That 40-acre site should be over 100,000 square feet, should be, depending on what it will be, between 10 and 25 million. And Centec Park, there's only 1 site left on Millennium Drive, and that yield for that 10-acre site should be between 5 and 15 million. So we've tried to either attract between hotels to animal veterinarian-related biotech businesses. That's what should go there. Worcester Business Development Corporation owns the site, so we work with them to help get people interested and move into that site. That's the last one left. So since I've been here, I think we've moved 3 out of the last 4, so we have 1 more to go. And then Pine Street, a lot of people might have heard about this recently. It's 8 acres of land. It's old state hospital land. We got it through a sales partnership agreement with the state of Massachusetts. It can be commercial development as well as residential. Obviously, a lot of those buildings are nice, but very old and in very poor condition. But the investment there, we're currently out to bid for that. The bid process for that is 3 months long, so we won't know until March who the best bidder is. But the yield for that, or the investment for that, we estimate between 25 and 50 million. So these are only 7 out of the 10, the Bolac site, the DPW site, and the Alfonso site along Route 30. Those other 3, I didn't put pen to paper to figure out what those would yield. But these right here, the low is 500 million and the high is 670 million. In context, you have 2.7 billion in assets throughout the entire community. So you pick up a huge chunk if you could do all these projects, which that's your silver bullet. If you wanted to have one or not do an override, that all happens, you're okay. But that stuff is ongoing, and I can't predict that. And I can't make it happen other than standing at the ready to have those developers walk through the door, do a development team meeting on Thursday, go to planning boards, go to ZBA and advocate for things to happen. So, and offer TIFs, provide a town meeting, and the select board vote to do those things as well. So that's the overall plan. Did the document make it all the way around? Are you still looking? All right, those just are really just cut sheets on the sites and what they offer. All of them have infrastructure, all of them have sewer and water and capacity, so we do what we can to promote and market those as we go. The last site, the mass development site that was transferred from DCAM, this is just a conceptual master plan for the whole site. It's on there, but this is a drawing that the state provided to us of how the buildings could lay out. So there is interest and there is investment, at least in the marketing aspect of it. On page 4, all we did here was just show the commercial, industrial, personal property, what the growth has been in each segment from 15 to 19, 15 to 20. So there has been movement in these categories from 67 to 72, 58 to 66, 101 million to 105. So it's moving in the right direction, but it's not going to offset the entire problem. Moving things, I've already covered the fact that we don't have carrying cost and maintenance costs for some buildings that we've got out to the private sector, if you will. An important note of recent, and what I've noticed from a staff meeting we had today is we've been really good at using other people's money to do projects that benefit the town. So Sue, you were around, we did FMAN, so the Fiber Municipal Area Network. It's designed for cable, to have cable signals throughout the building to be able to broadcast live. But we can do other things besides carry video through those glass lines, right? So we have all telephony, internet access, all comes back to this building. All the servers are here. So I don't have those remote sites having their own little areas that need to be managed, so we consolidate them all to here. It's a small thing, but we do it. We did it with this room was built with cable funds to provide transparency to the people who want to pay attention to local government. Downstairs, same room for the select board. It was all cable money, no general fund, no tax dollars. The old police station down there with a great studio that you'll have a tour of, I think, on Friday, they have a grand opening. That was all cable money. And, well, we borrowed it, but the money that they get from the franchise fee will pay the debt service. So, I mean, it's things like that that we try to offset cost wherever we go. One of the items in here when we get deeper in is health insurance. We've moved twice. We went to the GIC, we left the GIC, we went back to Harvard, which was a new plan for us. It's not easy to move 500 people who are potentially insured by the town onto a new health insurance plan. We've done it twice since 2008. And we did it because if we didn't, our, the $5 million we pay now in health insurance would be $9 million. So I can't say I saved you that, but I can say we avoided a $4 million increased cost in health insurance because we had to, right? To make everything work, we had to do those things and be pragmatic about it. So from small to large, from electric aggregation that we did, it's a small amount at the end of the day. I understand, $30 a month on average over a 32-month period is not a ton of money. But that's on average what we saved people when we aggregated the electric load for this community. That's a big deal. I think we should be very, very proud of the fact that we did that. It's millions of dollars for people overall, collectively, we save people.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Madam Chair, could we request that there's no cell phone use during this meeting? I think this is
Oh,
a
yeah,
critical
absolutely.
meeting, and I think we all deserve to pay attention to the information that's being transcribed and shared with us. Excuse me?
I write notes on my phone, is that all right?
So on page 5, if I would go back,
Yeah.
was health insurance. It's just important to note that, we tried to minimize those impacts. Page 6, we just broke out by category how we spend money in this community. And this chart that I'll pass around just shows what the budget categories are. So, yeah, obviously education, obviously culture and recreation, health and human services, public safety, public works, general government. This is a snapshot of where we are to balance FY20 and how that 2.1 million gets split up. So this would be great if I could put it up where everybody could see it, but I'll pass that along just so you can kind of see how it breaks out. But the budget categories of public safety, the important thing to take away here is, the national average, the chief will tell you pretty emphatically, is about 2.5 officers per 1,000. We have nowhere near that. So if we were to be where the average is for law enforcement, the increase just to one department alone to add those officers that the national, the FBI or the Department of Justice says you should have is a $924,000 increase. So the backdrop of that is the fire department. One of the charts back here will talk about public safety is a small amount per capita compared to everybody else. It's because you don't have a full-time fire department. These guys go in for, $20 an hour to put out a fire, which is it's an incredible deal, but it's not going to last. We know it's not going to last. The study showed us it's not going to last. So that's why we have to start to plan and provide for that. It's in the budget for '21 because I know I need to start down that road of some level of professionalism inside the department from a chain of command structure. So that's in there. Public Works, all I did here was just show what the growth has been from 14 till now and what the expense ratio is between expenses and personnel. There are over 100 lane miles. We do get Chapter 90 money based on those lane miles. There's other calculations that go into Chapter 90, like economic development activity, that if we don't have, we get about the same amount of money. So there is a calculation for that, and we advocate for that. It's about $500, $550 a year that we put right towards roads. General government, just an important, FYI in terms of the operating budget as it represents a percentage of the entire budget. It's a reduction from 473 of the total money you spend. Now it's down to 3.7 of the total number you spend. So we have contraction every year. And then we list some examples about staffing levels. The page previous, on page 6 at the bottom, under the charter, the town administrator acts as the DPW director. I'm pretty good with a shovel, but not a backhoe. So we went without for a long time because we just didn't have the money to do it. There was also a town engineer in 2009 or 10 that we didn't, he left and we didn't rehire. So there was probably like 200 with salary and benefits, over 200,000 in the mix that we just reduced off the budget. Of course, we did replace with an assistant town administrator for some number lower than that, so we had some cost savings. But the last sentence on that page, in terms of managing and getting through with the best service model, we have Public Works should encapsulate things like sanitation, water, sewer. So we took that model and we said, well, let's take the sewer superintendent, see if he can do the DPW work, and share the salary for that department head between an enterprise fund, which is no taxation issues for us relative to making that payment. So I've managed to be able to have a department head that 60% of his salary is covered by non-general fund dollars. So just by way of example of trying to find ways to get it done, it's just an illustrative example of how we've done that. Culture and recreation, you don't spend a lot of money on these type of things. They're minute in terms of the overall $63 million budget we appropriate. But I think it's important to note that recreation brings in, I think it's on the next page, on page 8, in both general fund and revolving account dollars, $431,000, when their recreation budget overall is $263. So that's an amazing thing that we do to provide a great service to the community. Next year, in the budget, it was asked for a full-time rec coordinator. We couldn't fund that. We said we can do half, as long as we can increase fees to offset that. So in terms of hiring someone at halftime, as long as we have fees that can pay for it, we will advocate for it. But no general fund money will be used for it. Health and Human Services, it's self-explanatory. Board of Health, Council on Aging, Veteran Services. Board of Health, 2013, 14, we joined the Worcester Health Alliance with six other communities. The chart will show what the savings has been comparatively from 14 to 20. So cumulatively, it's over $100,000 in savings just for that one move, which I think we have much better, broader service base from the Health Alliance than we would with one agent that has a particular expertise, making sure food is safe, that's critical importance. But they do that and so much more for less money than it was costing us before. Debt service, I only cover quickly because I need people to understand that we can only borrow, under the law, 5% of our equalized valuation. So it's our assessed value. The whole community's worth $2.7 billion. We can only do 5% of that, about $129 million. You're only at 2.07%. So in terms of even projects coming on, those will come on, but you're still under that 5%. So I worry that people worry that we're getting bloated, but the state requires us to stay under the 5, so it's important for you all to know where we're actually at. So we have issued and unissued debt that total 3.52%, but in terms of what we borrowed to date, it's only 2% of that equalized valuation. So that's in here, I'm not gonna belabor that. Per capita value for services, I covered a little bit in terms of how much people spend by category for public health, for public safety, public works, general government. So you'll notice in the first chart on page 10, Grafton, expense-wise, is not disproportionate to anybody else, but the public safety, that blue one at the bottom, is so much lower, and it's because we don't have a full-time or anything close to a full-time fire department. All those other communities do, and that's why they have that cost. So in terms of value for a long period of time, we've enjoyed it, and we've been very, very lucky to have enjoyed it. And we appreciate the fact that they'll go into a burning building for $20 an hour. I don't know if that's the number, but we should thank them at every opportunity. Staffing levels, we spend less on expenses, and then Westboro, what did you tell me? They have double the staff that we have for Westboro? And I would never use them as a comparison, except that they abut us, so it's not like there's an apples to apples comparison there. And then on page 11, we just get into total personnel costs per capita. So we are the lowest, we mentioned that earlier, compared to the other sister communities on the list. And then expenses, we are a little high here in terms of expenses, and I would argue that between trash, that some communities don't provide. I know Westboro does not provide it, but the Board of Health, that whole line used to, more than half of that line was in a salary, now it's in an expense, so that could skew the number too. So between those two pieces, that's why that's there. So going through these summits with staff and talking about capital needs and operational needs, we have needs just like the school department has. They never make it to the light of day because there's just not enough money to do it. So what you might see on the next pages may shock you, but I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm giving you a true picture of what the town department heads have told me they need in which to grow and to provide excellent customer service, and this is it. So we laid it out from 21 to 25, looking at a 5-year pattern of what's needed. In terms of personnel impact for the first year, it's about 450,000. There's 528 in expenses. Some of those expenses deal with overlay and abatement increases because you want to be able to protect the most vulnerable, and the other piece is snow and ice, the other piece is health insurance. So we have to provide an account for all those particular pieces. I am not, saying we must do. There is no must-dos at all. You can do any combination thereof. We're giving you scenarios of where we're at and what we think we need, and then the leadership will decide what the best course of action is relative to your constituency. Capital needs, Matt talks a lot about the fact that, we have a plan, but it's not funded. You are exactly right, yes.
Can I just go back to the full-time, you've got halfway down here, full-time fire captain, and you only have $100,000, and I thought at one of our board meetings, when we looked at the fire, science, the study, there were other additional positions that have been requested that I don't see reflected in 23, 24.
We have the
25.
chief budgeted right now for fiscal 21, July 1 start. So that's already in the mix, not contingent on the override, because it's kind of a must-do.
Okay,
And then the captain,
right, so the chief is in 21.
the chief is already in the 21.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Capital relative to the CIPC and using $1 million in free cash is not enough to deal with the $15 million backlog that's requested. Not all projects are gonna make it and get funded, but if we wanted to do this, going back to the road stabilization account, what I would recommend is you look at doing $1 million in the same fund and do those projects with that $1 million. And the board, depending on what people's appetite is and feedback they get from the community, they don't have to levy up to that limit. So if you only wanted to do 500,000 as opposed to $1 million, certainly you're not gonna do things, but at least there'll be a second fail-safe in the mix if taxes became too burdensome. And they can do the same thing with the road stabilization now. It's $1.5 million. We don't add the 2.5 on top of the 1.5 million, but we could. They could also go down to 500,000. You just do less projects in that fiscal year that you've only raised that 500,000 for. So there's added control with a 5-member board versus the entirety of town meeting. So we also looked at the cost of an override and whether folks can afford it. We are, based on what the school department presented last meeting and what our operational summits and capital summits have put out there, we're looking at $5.5 million over 5 years is what's needed to sustain us until 2025, excuse me. We'll obviously try to do better than that. So we made a commitment to the community. When we started this conversation, I reminded everyone, we said we would use $850 at the beginning with the override that was allowed, and then we would do about $200,000 a year. We would make that same commitment, I would think, to only spend up to the limit that is estimated right now. Health insurance, if I can't control those costs anymore, that's gonna be a variable we're gonna have to deal with. If marijuana doesn't come to fruition, it's a variable we're gonna have to deal with. If we wanna fund those things, we'll have to make decisions about not providing other services in order to do that. So for every $1 million that you levy, that we raise, however you wanna put it, through taxation, through town meeting, it costs about $151 for every $1 million that you add to the levy. So if you were to do the scenario, you're over almost $290 if you did the $1.8 million for the first year in 21. And then it's $150, it's always gonna grow. And if we
A
can
year,
continue
right?
to, I'm sorry?
A year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna continue to grow with an override or without, so the next page will, well, 2 pages, if you wanna skip 2 pages, I do a little income comparison relative to people's ability to pay for an override, and like I said earlier, we think based on the reported income to DOR, people do have the ability to pay. Whether they will or not is up to the voters to make that decision. But we show here on this last, page 15, what the average tax bill is for FY '20. We can't do anything with '20, because '20, tax rate is set, budget set, we're balanced, we have 100,000 in excess levy capacity, which will just roll for next year, which is great. It's great when I get on the phone call with a bond rating agency to try to get a AAA rating. All those things help. But right now, we're at 6920. No override in '21, you're gonna go to 7,096, and these are averages. You can't hold me to your tax bill being $7,000 next year. It's gonna be lower, it's gonna be higher. This is just an average based on values. But if you did the override, what did we do? We have 1, 2, 3 scenarios. You can do any combination thereof. If you want us to do other scenarios, you could. But I think you can do the math pretty quickly. For every million that you raise, it's gonna cost $151, and that's gonna be the impact to the taxpayer. So we do it at 5.5, only using the amount of money that's on the previous sheet for the school, of 877 and 978 for municipal, for a total of 1.8. And what that impact means, it's a $600 increase on average. And then you can do 5 million with no capital stabilization. You can do an override with school at 3.8, because that's what their spend out is if you do the math from left to right. And then capital only, if you just wanted to do capital and just do $1 million, it would be 7247. Then we gave you the sample ballot question. This is similar to the ballot question that you had before the voters in 2014. Obviously, the numbers have changed. It can be done in it can be broken apart. It can be 2 separate questions. That's really up for the leadership to decide. I just provided it for people to have some context around how it would be. The 6.5 is very intimidating for people to look at, but we have to realize what we did in 14 is we used 800 of the 3.5 million, and then we used 200,000, and then 200,000, so we committed to that, and we were successful in doing that. One year we hit a bump, we didn't fund the schools at the level of 525 because health insurance was through the roof at 8% or whatever the number was, so that's why that hit occurred. And then I just cover the timing. You do have a March primary for a presidential election, and then you have May's election. So you have an opportunity that the select board could decide something as early as the 21st, but that notice has to be given to the town clerk's office by the 28th of January to have an election. There is a lot of consternation from the state and from the clerk's office relative to running 2 simultaneous elections. It'll be 2 separate ballots. There's a lot of logistics there. I just say it just so everybody knows that it's not gonna be an easy task to check you in, you vote for presidential primary, and then come back, check in again, and then vote for a local election. So it's gonna be time consuming, because you have to do it that way. I don't wanna be that bureaucratic, but the state requires it to be 2 separate elections. So just in terms of logistics, that's how it could shake out. So the bottom of this, I'm sorry?
Would that happen in?
No, May would be one, because it's a town election for board and planning board and school committee, so they'll all be in one with the same question. No. At the bottom of this, if people had particular questions about anything that's in here, you can certainly call me. But I'll be happy to take questions. I know it's a lot, and it's condensed. There's a lot of detail in here, there's some granular stuff. Having to go through this and prepare, you get a lot of thoughts in terms of what you've done over the past 12 budget cycles and 11 years, and you go, wow, we've moved a lot of stuff along, and we've kept costs contained, and we've contracted in local government at every step of the way. So it's like, we should be proud of all those accomplishments. So if you have questions, I'm happy to take them. And if, Becca, if I miss something, then chime in.
Donna, before you speak, thank you, Tim. That was an excellent presentation. Really appreciate you walking us all through that. I want to just do a quick time check. We have about 10 minutes. I'm happy to go a little over, but if people need to leave, then they should just leave if they have other obligations. And we do have people coming in to present for school committee. So with that, I'll open the floor to questions. Donna?
So one of the things that's not as part of this presentation is our debt service. And for this fiscal year and next fiscal year, our high school debt service is reduced from previous years, but some of the DPW and library kick in. So right now, the average homeowner is paying just over $500 a year for debt service. But in 2022, that goes up to nearly $700 per
Correct.
year and stays at that level through 2030. So I think that has to be part of this conversation as well, because the taxpayers are already obligated to pay almost an additional $200 for the next.
Yeah, but
Series
that's
of
factored
years.
into that. The sheet on the second to last page, that includes the debt.
On which page?
On page
The
15.
total tax burden includes the estimated debt for the library and DPW in the out years on page 15. You're right, it does go up, because we haven't fully funded the library or DPW, well, DPW, yes, library, not entirely. But it's in this calculation of what the average is if we do nothing. Those debt service payments are in that average tax bill.
So in the no override.
Yes.
Tim, for the people watching at home or maybe in the room who are looking at the number 6.5 million and getting a little bit concerned, what, can you explain to people a little bit about how exemptions work and how abatements work, and if necessary, how they can go about applying for those? And then, if you recall, did you find that applications for exemptions and abatements rose in the years immediately after 2014, or did that
They
remain
did
relative?
not.
Okay.
But Mary's got, I mean, I can tell you February 1st is the deadline. You want to talk about the exemption abatements? Because you have blind, widow, veterans. You can go right to the podium. if you
Mary,
want.
yeah, if you could go right up.
You-
to the-
you- It's all right if I let her go.
Yep.
right? All right.
Okay, two separate programs, is exemptions and their abatements. The exemptions are for people who qualify. If you're blind, we have exemptions for the blind. We have, for disabled veterans, a minimum of 10%, disabled veteran, and they can apply for the, exemptions with us. And that deadline is April 1st for any exemptions. We also have, a 17D, which is our seniors, our surviving spouses, and that is a 65-year-old minimum, and that does go on your assets, and that changes every year for the amount of assets you have in the bank. For our 41C, you have to be 65, and it also goes on your income and your assets. Any of these, you can come and speak with us in the assessor's office, get the applications, we'll give you the forms, we'll need the documentation, and we're more than happy to help anybody with that. So those are the programs we have right now. For abatements, that would be, we have till February 1st to file for an abatement. You have to, basically it goes on your value. So what it is you're contesting that if you were to put your house on the market today, it's not gonna sell for that price. And our, what am I trying to say? Our values come from the qualified sales for 2018 for our 2020 tax bills, and that is what the community is doing right now. We've seen incredible increases in all the values across the board, because everybody's coming this way, and that's where our values are. So what you would do is you would come to the office. We do have all the applications online. If anybody just wants to go online, you can always call the office. You can come into the office, and we will give, we will help you through the steps with it. We'll get you your field card. We have a whole book of every sale that is qualified, broken down into if you have a Cape, if you have a Colonial, if you have a ranch. These are the sales that we're comparing your properties to. So, and anybody can come in.
But
with-
no, well, you weren't here in 14, but I know,
I-
because, knowing, the reason why we changed the exemption levels and the income levels to the maximum under the
Right.
law was because we were worried about that, but there were no significant increases in applications for any of those.
Right, I think, right now, I mean, I've looked over the past, 5 years, I've only been here 3, but it's pretty steady. We have had more, I know, for our veterans, we are getting more veterans exemptions, because I think the Veterans Administration is working with our veterans,
Right.
and it's an easier process, I think, than it used to be, so we've seen a big increase for our veterans. For our seniors, they come in, and most of them do qualify because we do get their income and their assets. But it's all in if they want to come in and apply. And we reach out to them. I did do a program for the senior center last year. I've done a program for the Disabled Commission,
Disability Commission.
yeah, the Disability Commission a few weeks ago. So, yeah, we're more than happy. But the big thing is for your abatements, if you're questioning your value, that's February 1st is our deadline. For our exemptions, you have up till April 1st to file on those.
And the important thing is, in this whole scenario that we're developing, we decreased the overlay this year to 150.
Yes.
Normally, we do 300, and then when we know we don't have that liability, we free it up to do other things. Town meeting has to vote that. We don't just decide. We make the proposal, town meeting votes it. We are doing this. If we were to do this, we have to increase that because we have the same feel we had in 14, as we want to protect those people. So we increase it by 150,000, get it back to 3.
Okay.
And I just want to make one note, when I started here in 17, it was a reval year. This is a reval year also, so the DOR has come in and certified all my values, and usually that's when you see the increase. So when I started in 17, I walked in and there were 62 applications on the desk for abatements. Over the past 2 years, between that reval, there was only probably 22, and 18. And this year, right now, I'm sitting with maybe about 15. But I do expect more. But usually when that value goes up, people aren't looking at the value, they're looking at, oh my gosh, my tax rate went so high, so that's why they're coming in. And once they realize where we're getting that value, it's a learning curve, so.
Yeah, I've received some of those comments.
Yeah.
So, but thank you.
But, anybody can come in and talk to us and feel free to file that application if they'd like.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, I just want to be respectful of the time. So I guess one of the biggest questions we have to answer tonight, there's a lot of things to discuss moving forward for sure. But the one question that we have to figure out an answer to tonight or by our meeting next week is if we are going to strive for that March ballot. Because that decision has to be made quickly. The other decisions, Tim has laid out a lot of different options. Again, these are just options. That is a big price tag, but we can talk about how much we think, would be the amount to ask for. We can talk about if we want to do it at all. We can do all of those things, and there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of details we have to go through both in our budget and your budget. I mean, those questions we are going to have to examine and answer and be open and transparent with everybody. But the initial question we have to kind of solve before we move forward is, do we want to try for March? There are pros and cons. Primaries get a lot of voters, so we get a good representation of the town, probably more so than a local election. It's also a short time frame, so that's a con, in terms of deciding what exactly we want that question to be, because there's going to have to be a lot of conversation around that. So I just kind of wanted to throw it out there and just kind of get a sense of the boards, is March something that you want to go for, or maybe Jay or Tim has it, or if we just want to.
I'll be the first.
Sure, so
I
go
don't
ahead.
think, I don't think March is going to give us enough time to educate the public out there. We have to educate ourselves as this committee and go through what you just said. So we have a lot of education to do to the community, and we can't do that in an effective way by March. May, I think, is the better time to do it. Plus, it cuts down, they just go in and vote once. They aren't going to have to go back and vote twice. So I'm for May.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the voting twice for March aspect really concerns me, just by making things more complicated and more of a barrier for people to cast that second ballot. So I definitely feel like doing it in May would be better.
Well, you can recognize yourself
I'm
there.
Laura. No, I just want to throw just another thought. We do then we'll have to move on with our layoffs regardless on May, so we might, if we don't do it in March, we'll be laying off people, and we'll be losing people if it passes. What happened last time was we had to lay people off. They went and got new jobs. So that's just one thing, and we have to prepare 2 budgets, so it's extra work on all of you. But that's just
No,
another
that's-
thought
yeah.
to think of. Mark, I saw
Yeah,
your hand first.
I agree with Sue in terms that March is too fast, but May, waiting till May is after town meeting, causes the situation that you just mentioned with 2 budgets. There's nothing prohibiting the select board from calling a special election for an override prior to town meeting to get that ballot question out, so that when you go into town meeting, you know what you have to work for. It's not gonna cost any more than doing the March election, because you had to do 2 ballots anyway. You'd have some cost for election workers and stuff, but it seems to me that you wanna have the answer before you get to town meeting on this, so you may wanna consider, another option could be having a ballot, having a special election prior to the May town meeting. Or delay the budget until after the election. So open town meeting and then continue the budget until after the ballot, so you don't have to go through 2 budget cycles. Just a thought.
Again, we don't have to recreate the wheel either, right? If you
Right.
pick a number, we did a contingency budget for the second
Yeah.
article. After Article 5, we did 6 was a contingent for 800,000, contingent on the override passing. So you could wait, you could do it either way. You could do it ahead of time. You have those options, but you can always do the contingents. But people are used to it, that's why I say it, and they voted for it. So I figure if they know it and they've already said yes, don't change the formula.
So Jen, what do we want to do for next steps? Like, how much do you need of us? Do we want to try to do another tri-committee meeting? Do you want to meet first as your board next week? And I know I'm throwing this out there, but
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly other things we have
yeah,
to talk about, so I think we do need another
Okay.
meeting,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
I'm getting the feeling that, again, our next meeting is next Tuesday.
yeah.
And that's really, if we were going to put a question for March, we would have to pretty much hash all this stuff out then. But I'm kind of getting the feel of the room. I should
Yeah.
probably check in with the select board, feeling that, or do you agree that March is too quick? Would you rather consider a special ballot or May? Or how are you guys feeling? And ladies, Donna,
I think March is too soon.
okay?
I would concur. March is too soon.
Okay,
All right then. Fine.
all right, then that gives us more time, unless anybody else has any other, any other input for that.
Sorry, I wasn't aware of the layoff issue before I gave my opinion earlier. As someone who has been laid off twice, I do know that it's a huge disruption to people's lives, and I don't think it's something to take lightly. So I would kind of agree with Mark that maybe a separate special election before May, like sometime late April, would be better. I think just to do right by those teachers who would be laid off.
What's the latest that you can go, Laura?
Yeah, Dr. Cummings,
Right.
what?
Jay?
In actuality, we're gonna let people know in April. So they're going to know. The way it typically would play out is whoever that, probably a newer teacher is, they go out, they're gonna look for a job. If they secure one, I understand, just pretend the override passes, and we'd basically offer that job back to the person. The good likelihood he or she might have found another job, but that's the way it plays out. But it's only fair to them to tell them by April at the latest.
But they work they work until June 16th.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
right,
they're
they
not,
don't quit. Like, we
right.
don't-
But it just, reality, we did lose people who went off, really good teachers who went off, and that,
Yeah, and that's certainly not unique to that. The
No.
districts
And the
that-
legal requirement is June 1, is that correct?
It's in the contract. I think it is June 1st.
Okay.
It varies a little bit by district, but by June 1st,
It's
that ship has
typically the-
largely sailed. Like,
okay.
just as good practice, we want to tell people sometime
As soon as
early
possible,
April.
right?
Yeah.
so in the interest of time, and because this would be a nightmare for me, I think Jen and Matt and I we'll get together and we'll maybe do a Google Doodle that we can send, or Doodle to send out, and people can pick a date to meet again, unless you want us, you don't want us all next week, I'm assuming.
No, I think,
No.
we don't, no, I mean, you're
I'm
all
just
welcome to
kidding.
come,
Of
obviously,
course.
but,
You know what I mean.
yeah,
Yeah,
if we don't have to
right, yeah, but I
come up with
don't,
if we don't have to go through that whole
Yeah.
thing, we're still gonna have a discussion
of
about it.
course,
but
yeah,
we're
but
just-
you
yeah.
don't need all of us next
Right,
week. What
right.
I would rather do than all of us sit here getting out our calendars, because that would not be efficient, is do it electronically, and we'll come up with some times. Is that okay? Does that
yeah,
make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything urgent that people need to say before we adjourn this meeting
I
tonight?
guess I just want to bring up the idea that, although, of course, it sounds like we're converging on a decision to not go for March, that doesn't necessarily give us a lot of additional time. So we need to make this decision quickly, whatever it's going to be. I think there has to be a sense of urgency to making a decision so that we can play the budget scenarios out, everybody can prepare, and we get, going with whether the budget process and kind of mechanisms for elections and all that, get it all in play, so.
You know what the date is in April?
There isn't a set date, but it typically before the third week. Third week's vacation week, so I'd say the 15th.
And that being said too, if when you walk out, you come up with questions, please feel free to email Jen, myself, Matt, Jay, Tim, Captain put his email, like, we are all accessible, we're all happy to answer questions. I know this was a lot of information very quickly, and we haven't had time to digest, so of course you're gonna have questions. We love to be prepared with answers for your questions in advance. Same for people at home and in the audience. Please reach out directly to us via email. We're happy, we're all happy up here to meet with people and talk through anything you have. I hope you guys don't mind that I say that, but I know all of you. I want to thank everybody coming out tonight. It was great to have you, and invite you all to stay for our school committee meeting. So in that respect, I'll take a motion to adjourn on my committee.
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Gotta go.
No.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll take a few minutes break and re-adjourn when we're settled.
Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to our January 14th, 2020 school committee meeting. We are starting a little bit later tonight because we just finished our tri-committee meeting. I want to wish everybody in Grafton a happy new year and also congratulate our state champion cheerleading team. A lot of great things that I'm sure we will hear from the superintendent later happened since the time we have met. We do have a pretty full agenda items tonight, and we do have to go into executive session. So sometimes we'll take questions from the crowd after a presentation. For tonight, I'm going to hold any questions from the crowd after presentations, and you can absolutely reach out after the meeting via email or phone or personal meetings. With that being said, though, I will certainly take any opening comments from the public tonight. You can feel free to speak about the meeting you were just at or anything else that you are concerned about. Do I have anybody? Okay, thank you. Hearing none. We are going to jump right into general business, and we have been waiting for this report for a couple of months. We had 2 snowed out meetings, so Bob and Nicole, I appreciate your patience and thank you for your flexibility. I would like to present Bob, our special ed director, Bob Wall, and our assistant special education director, Nicole McDonald. Nicole, I don't think the committee has met you, so welcome and thank you for both coming.
Thank you for having us.
Nicole, I don't know, I don't want to put you, I'm going to put you on the spot, but do you want to share just a little bit about your background, just before we get started?
So I have been with Grafton Public Schools for the past 5 years. I started with Grafton Public Schools as a behavior specialist coordinator, working at North Grafton Elementary, South Grafton Elementary, Grafton Middle School, and Grafton High School. And then I moved into a preschool coordinator role and team chair. So I've been the preschool coordinator and team chair for the past 3 years, and just now moving into this role. Prior to Grafton Public Schools, I was actually working in a residential program for a number of years, including doing mental health clinical work, as well as moving into a program director role there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Great. And then we're going to turn it over to you, and we're really excited to hear about your initiatives for the year. So
Well,
thank you.
We're really excited to roll them out. So just want to kind of start off by saying that when Nicole and I undertook this endeavor, one of the things it is that we decided is that we wanted to reimagine the way it is that special education is administrated, supervised in the district. So while, because of requirements and everything, one is director and one is the assistant, we're both special education administrators. So that's important for us, not only with our interactions with staff, interactions with administrators, interactions with parents. My words are Nicole's and Nicole's words are mine. We work together in tandem. So when we sat down and took a look at what the impact of that would have on the district, we considered our backgrounds and our strengths. And so what we did was we came up with a plan that we presented to Mr. Cummings that we felt would be the best plan for the district. And then as a result of some of the work it is that we've done, walking the floorboards, our experience in the district, some initiatives it is that we felt were really important for us to highlight. Now, as we go through this is prior to us undergoing our tiered focus monitoring. Our tiered focus monitoring will be next year. We're starting our self-assessment late winter, early spring, where we start taking a look at IEPs and the nature of that. Then the Department of Education will come in, and they will do, as they do on a triennial basis, their monitoring of our programs and make some recommendations for improvement. But we're not the sort that kind of wait around. We had some things that we know that we needed to get going, so we got going. So without any further ado, so when we designed this, what we did was we took a look at the buildings, and we wanted to make sure that the buildings had more administrator access. So I myself directly supervise the special education programs overall at the high school, the middle school, North Street and Millbury Street, where Nicole supports North and South Grafton Elementary Schools, their pre-K, K, and 1 programs. I supervise the team chairs and school psychs in those buildings, as Nicole supervises the team chairs and school psychs in her buildings. I meet with the staff in those buildings, and as does Nicole. In addition to that, she works with the specialized, substantially separate programs across the district, so to make sure that those individual programs also get the attention it is that they need. We both support students in out-of-district placements. In addition, because of her background, Nicole supports board-certified behavior analysts and the behavior specialist consultants. So right now, one of the things it is that we felt that we wanted to do is provide greater in-district support. So every single district throughout Grafton Public Schools right now is reviewed by Nicole or myself. Individuals evaluated by the special education administrator have at least monthly individual meetings. So we both meet with school psychologists on a monthly basis, and we meet with the team chairs on a weekly basis. The team chair meetings, we endeavor to also stop in and speak with the principals. Sometimes that's a, hey, how you doing? Sometimes that's a, oh, I need to talk to you for a few minutes. And depending upon then or at another time, at another scheduled time, to have conversations about what's going on in the building. We felt it was important for us to have the pulse of what's going on in our buildings. We have monthly meetings of all the team chairs. We have bi-monthly meetings on opposite months with school psychologists and speech-language pathologists, again, to make sure that we're supporting them when they were meeting their needs, addressing any particular issues throughout the districts. And then we're in the process of planning a special education retreat this January, and that would address instructional practices across the district, paraprofessionals, substantially separate classes, and co-taught classes. So special projects, there's some things it is that we felt needed a particular point of emphasis. So for myself, and I've begun the process of reviewing our student support team processes that we currently have in place. I'm in the process of going through that. We're also in the process of reviewing our collaborative teaching, reviewing previous PD, evaluating current practices, and then developing a plan for next steps, and also making a real emphasis on data-driven decision-making. That includes the decisions it is that Nicole and I make. It also includes encouraging our buildings and our teams to be more data-driven and be less dependent on anecdotal information. What I like to say is anecdotes are great for dinner time conversation, but they make for lousy IEPs. For Nicole, she's in the process, well, here.
Perfect.
Why should I speak for you?
So I am in the process of taking a look at our paraprofessional deployment, as well as training, as well as supervision and oversight. Taking a look at establishing some entrance and exit criteria for our IEP teams to be a little bit more informed and have a little bit more background on students that require that level of support, because as you know, that is a very intrusive level of support to have an adult with you during your class time and with your peers. And then I'm also taking a look at our specialized substantially separate programs, which are included throughout the district from pre-K all the way up to our school to work program, and really taking a look at the curriculum that is being implemented at those classrooms, taking a real step into much more functional and vocational skill building to really prepare those students that are in our more intensive needs classrooms for adult services as well as talking about inclusive practices and how those students are meaningfully included into our regular education or general education classrooms.
Can I just ask a quick question, because I'm kind of new here? Can you define substantially separate programs for me?
Sure.
And also give me an idea of what the scope of that is among the population of students?
Sure. So substantially separate through the IEP process is at 80% of the time is spent out of the classroom.
Yep, out of the
Speaking
general
correctly,
education classroom.
Out
Yep.
of the general education classroom. Those students are considered substantially separate as a placement. We have specific programs throughout the district from pre-K all the way up through our kind of school to work program. Because our school to work program does not involve any students that are not on IEPs, it's considered substantially separate because they're not with their typically developing peers, if that makes sense. So some of our other programs we have at the high school, we have more of a life skills program, which some of those students are considered substantially separate because of the amount of time they spend in that classroom or in their OT, PT, speech and language services, and that all the way from pre-K all the way up. We have those services. So that population is typically some of our students that are at a higher level of need, that have a little bit more of a moderate to severe disability. And so we service them through that programming. Does that help?
It did.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so, and one of the other questions that came up was a question about dyslexia, and dyslexia has been the hot topic in education as of late. And when you've been around the block a couple of times, as I have, you kind of know that there are certain topics, certain special education subgroups that get a great amount of attention during different times within special education. There was once a time when the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder was very, very controversial, and there was a lot of questions about that really existed as a disorder. There was a time when autism spectrum disorder first emerged upon the landscape, and then the conversation that happened with Asperger's. There was a conversation around nonverbal learning disabilities and whether or not that would be incorporated under the federal law, which it was not. The dyslexia conversation is the most recent conversation. And I quoted the definition here from the International Dyslexia Association. It's something that's been around in special education from time immemorial. We just don't call it dyslexia. We call it specific learning disability because dyslexia only covers a small portion of what a student with a learning disability might potentially have. So dyslexia is a certain subset of a reading disorder. But in addition to that, you could have a written expression issue. You could have a math disability. Within the DSM-5 criteria, they talk about dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So they kind of group these into broad categories. But in special education, we actually further refine them. So it really, you start to talk, and it really comes down in some cases to semantics. So for a long time, because these were medically applied terms, in special education has really stayed away from that. We were strictly told by the Department of Education not to use that term. It's only been in the last year or two as a result of the different laws that have been passed at the legislature that the Department of Education has said that in fact, yes, that not only can you, but you know, depending upon the background, you can be encouraged to utilize the word dyslexia in an IEP. So when you talk about dyslexia, you have to think about it in terms of the groups it is that you're talking about. So when you talk about all students, all of the white, that entire white is all the students in general education and in special education. That's all students. So then within that, you get a circle of students that are eligible within special education. And those are the students within that circle in red. So within that, you have the square of students that are considered eligible with a severe learning significant learning disability. The subset within that are students that are eligible within reading, and you'll notice that that circle is the bigger part of the square of students with significant learning disabilities because they actually represent the largest part of our population. of students with learning disabilities. Students with dyslexia, oh no, here we go. You'll notice that that oval there kind of overlaps groups. So you have some students who have considered dyslexia, but they're not in the special education realm. Those students we address either in the classroom or we have Title I pull-out services and do interventions with them. Then we have students that are in special education that might have mild dyslexia, but not to the extent where they qualify with a specific learning disability. But then, as you look at that, you see that there are students who, within a specific learning disability, they actually also qualify for special education services with a reading disability as well. So, disability in the federal qualification and mass qualifications for a reading disability, and when you use the term dyslexia, they don't mean exactly the same thing. Dyslexia, much like we talk about with autism, exists on a spectrum. You have some students that are mildly affected and some students that are significantly and profoundly affected. And because of the width and breadth of that population, some of them, because their level of disability is somewhat mild, are actually addressed in the general education setting. Some of them in the pull-out Title I classes, which are still within the general education, but not necessarily within a general education classroom, but then also within special education, and then finally within students with specific learning disabilities. Does anybody on the committee have any particular questions about that?
Thank you.
So that really, I believe, brings us to the end of what it is that we wanted to talk about. Are there any particular questions that you had with regards to anything that special education is doing currently and what Nicole and I are doing?
I was
Yes.
just gonna ask, since you came on board, I know it's a big learning curve there's a lot to learn in your position, so I just wanna know if you felt like you've been supported or there's things that we can do.
Well,
or-
I've been a special education previously in my career for 17 years, so I've been around the block once or twice. I've never seen a higher level of support than I have here at Grafton Public Schools. Everybody from the superintendent right on down has been amazingly supportive to the both of us. The opportunity to work with somebody as talented as Nicole has been truly a blessing. This really has been an amazing. I was out to dinner with a couple of administrators prior to coming here. The support it is amongst the administrative group here in this district has been absolutely amazing. It truly has been, and I feel truly blessed to be here.
Oh, it's great to hear, thank you.
Heather?
You mentioned that you were pushing people to make decisions based on data.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the nature of the data that you're collecting, how you collect it, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. When you're talking special education, it all depends upon the area of disability. So the data that a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst, would collect around behavior and how often it is that a certain behavior occurs is a little bit different than how a teacher of reading in special education might collect data around what kind of fluency the student has been having, how many words they've read appropriately within a certain amount of time, how many errors it is that they've made for their accuracy, things of that nature. So what it really comes down to is making sure that when you write a goal, the goal clearly defines what growth you expect out of that student over the course of a year. And when I say clearly defined, it needs to be a SMART goal. So you need to think in terms of, making sure that it's very specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic, and it's timely. It has some kind of a time factor to it. So all of our IEP goals need to be SMART goals. And then in addition to that, you need to have objectives, obviously, that help build into that goal. And those objectives also need to be things that you can measure through the use of data. But the most important part that drives the whole train is how do you decide what things to make goals of and what things not to make goals of? And so that's probably the most important part of the whole data collection piece, is that prior to writing a goal, the teacher has to actually collect some data around the student's weaknesses to get an idea of what their baseline is, what their starting point is, so that then they can get an idea of, from this starting point over the course of a year, where do we anticipate that we'll be able to go? And that's a projection, and as we know, sometimes our projections are spot on, sometimes they're a little weak, sometimes they're overly ambitious. And if we find a student isn't making that kind of progress it is that we need when we collect that data, then we come back as a team, we review that progress, and we make a determination of whether or not we need to make adjustments to that student's IEP. But it really comes down to collecting, and it's called formative assessment. So based on what it is a student is doing in the classroom, it doesn't have to be anything different. A student could be doing an essay, and you want to know how they're doing on their punctuation, their spelling, and their grammar. You can do that based on that essay and collect that data, and then do that over a couple of different data points to be able to give yourself a baseline for where it is that they are right now, and then do that ongoing throughout the year to collect your data to demonstrate the kind of progress it is that they're making on that objective. Does that help?
And I think just to add on too, I mean, we also encourage all of our teams to really explore what is developmentally appropriate for that child. So if we're looking at a 5-year-old and we're talking about on-task behavior and attention, that's going to look very different than a 14-year-old, you know, so we're not going to expect that 5-year-old to attend completely for 100% of the time. Do you know what I mean? And really making it so that it's based on what is developmentally appropriate and what our standards are, based on the frameworks, and kind of aligning our goals to the stepping stones to reach that developmental goal or that standard.
Any other questions? I have a question. So, a question that I get frequently, especially when we're talking about budget, and I know we have a great out-of-district placement kind of percentage. And thank you for all of your hard work. One question that often people get who don't really understand, they think, is there anything we could do? Is there a wide group of a certain group of people that get out-of-district placement that we could bring back in if we just added one more program?
I would love to tell you that that would be the case, because if
Yeah.
I was, I'd be chomping at
doing
the,
it.
I'd be chomping at the bit. But to be honest with you, the students it is that we have, when you take a look at the number of students it is that we have out of district, which right now hovers below 30, and when you talk about, the numbers you'd have to get together to be able to build a program and make it cost-effective within the district, but then also the students it is that would be readily able to populate that program.
Access it.
Yeah, we just don't have the numbers of that. Now, there's a good part and a bad part to that. The good part is that, yeah, we don't have those kind of numbers, so that's actually a good thing. I mean, but, you know, we don't have the number of students it is that we could effectively bring back to have a program. The one thing that this district does an especially good job of is helping support students so they don't have to go out. I hear, for better or worse, from advocates all across the state, I tell people what a great job it is that you guys do. And, you know, I got a parent who's talking to me about where it is that they want to move, and I go, oh. But, I mean, it's a compliment, because what it is that, and I can't take any credit for that, this was built by the predecessors, but our programming, especially for students that are on the spectrum, is a state model. I mean, it really is phenomenal. There are a lot of districts that would beg, borrow, and steal to be able to do that. And that is probably the thing that has helped us more than anything else in keeping our numbers low. So it's an investment, but that investment has paid huge dividends over the course of several years, and anticipate that it will continue to provide dividends. I've sat in IEP meetings with kids at the high school level who are in the middle school level who are exiting from services that in other districts would have been an out-of-district placement. And that's not an exaggeration. So, I mean, we really do get an incredible value, especially with that particular population. So, as I look at it right now, I can tell you quite comfortably that that isn't the case, but that is the sort of thing that we do look at on a monthly basis. We sit down and we have a meeting with Jay, and we kind of go over where things are at out of district, the kiddos it is that we're concerned about that might be heading in that direction, and what it is that we're doing right now to intervene with them, but the reasons why and why our concerns are. So that is something that we do review on a regular basis. Long-winded answer to a simple question.
It's not a simple question, and I think I appreciate it. And I think it's important when we talk about value that it's not just about money; it's about what's best for the kids. And I think that that's something that we always keep in mind in our district, and trying to do what's right. Then just kind of a follow-up, I guess, to that question would be, and sort of what Jen asked too, is there any additional services we could be providing to our teachers or our paraprofessionals to help them work with the children even better?
Well, go ahead, I'll let you start off there.
Perfect, thank you. So with regard to the paraprofessionals themselves, this year we really worked to develop the professional development for them. This coming January, we're doing specific training on applied behavior analysis and providing different levels of that training. So we're doing an introduction to applied behavior analysis. We're doing an introduction to discrete trial training, which is a type of therapy that's involved in that. And we're doing a training on task analysis and incidental teaching, which is another kind of more advanced version of a therapeutic intervention. And then we're also doing one on behavior support planning and how to navigate challenging behavior. So we're allowing our paraprofessionals to kind of run the gamut, and if you want to experience a little bit more about kind of some of those interventions, here's a great segue to that with some training and some additional information. The last paraprofessional training, we really focused in on special education services, confidentiality, how paraprofessionals can advocate for themselves and what they need for their students. So we're really trying to really boost up their confidence and their training and their ability to navigate and work with students that may be headed in that direction. And I think we're trying to really work with our teachers as well. Bob's really done a lot of work with our special education teachers specifically, but also in talks with our regular ed teachers about what they need from us to help support them. I think Bob and I's viewpoint is not that it's a regular education versus a special education, because it's all education and it's all one thing. So if we can support our general educators and support our regular education teachers that are in there working with our kiddos every day, the goal would be that they don't get to us. So we're a tier 3 support. Special education is kind of all the way up there. That's kind of our end game. So I think we've been really trying to work with our general education staff to build up their capacity and build up their knowledge and ability to implement any accommodations for students that they might need, different things like that. So that's really our goal, is to kind of help them and beef that up on that end as well.
And then, in addition to that, to kind of build on that, when you talk about the area where it is that we can get the best return on investment, in my opinion, it's where it is that most of the students interface with special education, and that's in team teaching. The vast majority of our students, to the district's credit, are involved in inclusive teaching practices, so we want to improve those practices because we believe that we can get better outcomes for kids. So that's why it is that that's been an area that we've particularly been paying some attention to, and will be the subject of professional development moving forward.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up?
Of course. Yeah.
Back to the paraprofessional trainings. What's the response been from that group? My sense is you can't mandate those trainings, but what kind of response are you getting? Are they for it? Are they eager to learn?
So they are definitely for it. I've gotten great feedback. So I've done the paraprofessional trainings up the first 2 that we had and afterwards I get a lot of feedback like, thank you so much. The questions and the engagement is really there from them, which I have really appreciated. We've been able to kind of break up the groups a little bit. So we haven't done like huge groups. So it's been a little bit more personal. People are able to ask questions, give examples of things they've encountered, and they've been kind of supporting each other, which I've really liked to see. So far, it's all been really positive about the professional development. They want it, and they're participating for the most part.
Great.
Sure. Any other questions? Did you guys have anything you wanted to add?
Just thank you very much for having us and having
Yeah.
the opportunity to share what we're doing. We're really excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
Jay kind of giggles at us sometimes because we get a little bit passionate about what it is that we do, but we do. We have a passion for what we do.
Yeah.
We really enjoy it.
it comes out when you speak to us. So I really appreciate you both coming, and I thank you again for your flexibility with our weather issues. If I could control that, I would be a happy person. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
so
Have a
much.
good night.
Thank you.
And next on our agenda, we're going to talk through the budget. Again, well, we actually haven't really talked through our budget.
Obviously, we certainly can. I just put a couple slides together tonight, and they were really about that, kind of what we talked a little bit about. Tim mentioned the different budgets in the previous meeting. In that currently, we have on the board, if you will, that preliminary school department budget with that increase of 5.9%. That's what we've been talking about. We've started, I don't even remember if it was at the last meeting back in, November. So we haven't had the discussions, focused discussions on when we move to the 3.5% increase, that is our given allotment. And by, I think it's even town charter, we have to have, the school committee needs to vote, ideally, to approve that bottom line number by typically the end of January. Today I talked to Tim. We have a meeting in February. That would give we need time. So I said, why don't we focus on it during the meeting on the 28th of January, and then February 11th, we'd have a budget hearing. It's usually a half hour. It could be longer, it could be shorter, where people can come and make comments. Then we jump into the regular meeting, and at some point in that regular meeting, vote on the new number. That's that 3.5. That would, obviously, that lower number is going to be paired with the reductions. So in terms of timeline, we've already started working on what that recommendation would look like when we have to reduce roughly $878,000 from the budget that we have been discussing. Again, talk about it publicly on the 28th, have that budget hearing, and then ideally have the vote on the 11th, so that the town budget would be balanced. So that budget is what would go into effect if an override does come to fruition and say it didn't pass. That would be our resulting default budget, the one at 3.5%. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, the committee's voting on that bottom line number. We've always worked, obviously, in concert. I don't have secret reductions. They're very, very public. But what is voted on doesn't lock us in. Like, say something changes, and things do change. Kids move in, whatever. A million different things can happen. The individual lines might shift a little bit, but that bottom line number won't shift unless we were to have an override, or we were to get additional state funding, something big picture changed, sure. So on the 28th, what we'll do is we will come back to you with, I feel like we just finished that 200-page book. The essence of the book remains the same, but all of the numbers shift because you're taking out almost $1 million. As far as my best thinking is today, I would still stick with the FY21 reductions that I've put before you. Where it's going to be a challenge. The whole thing is a challenge, of course, but the line reductions up there, in total, it's going to be it looks to be about $220,000 worth of non-personnel. That's actually a lot of stuff, if you will. We typically go to technology and we go to maintenance. We've gone to the maintenance well so many times, there's very little left in that well, and we've got so many little projects that have just piled up. I'm reluctant to go back to maintenance. People think, supplies is an endless amount. It really isn't. But we probably have to go to supplies and technology, and I'm going to have to, on the 28th, speak to what exactly that means. Not everybody. A lot of people are okay with cutting technology until, understandably, the classroom projector, the laptop doesn't work, the desktop, what have you. I think our teachers do a fantastic job using the technology that we have, but I've been in districts where it doesn't work and it breaks and there is no replacement. That would be unfortunate, but that 220,000 is going to be a challenge.
Comment and then a question.
Fire away. That
My-
was really
yeah,
pretty much
well,
it.
my comment about technology, which I know everybody on this committee knows, is it's now a part of, I consider it a part of our education, our curriculum.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
consider it just as an add-on or an extra anymore. And I think we're behind districts that are one-to-one, at least through middle school, and don't have that access. So I'm just gonna
And-
get on my soapbox.
Yeah.
Do those
Well said.
positions, do they include unemployment costs?
No, at this point, we haven't, I don't have a definitive answer from the town administrator.
Yeah.
If we do, there is some money, I believe it's about 50,000 in that FY '21 line on the municipal side
Yeah.
for unemployment. I've said it 100 times, but if you play it out, the rule of thumb is for every 3 positions, you would add a 4th to cover the unemployment.
Right.
So that 40 positions really is 53 or something.
Right, and even with that 7, then it would be two more. So it would
Correct.
really be 9. Do we
Right.
know when we'll know that?
I'm hoping to know this week. I've been
Yeah.
saying that for a couple weeks, I'll admit.
No, I know.
We'll have a better sense. It's purely speculative going out because you
Right.
don't know who has insurance, who doesn't have insurance.
Yeah.
But in the near future, when we figure out exactly who would be impacted, we're actually we would know if they need to
Okay.
be covered.
Okay. Thanks.
So,
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I was going to make the same point about technology, that when we talk about going to cutting technology, we're not talking about cutting new investments. We're talking about replacing, correct?
correct.
So
Yes.
like the
Yeah,
smart
yeah.
board that breaks, it needs to be replaced because otherwise the teacher now cannot teach,
Yeah, that's,
because the whole curriculum is now based around that method of delivery.
Yeah.
We're not talking about new,
No.
laptops and stuff like that. It's just maintenance,
I'm glad
really.
you brought that up. We have a fairly, I don't know, robust is the wrong word, but I think Neil Trahan and the tech department have done a nice job with the monies that we do have, trying to, on a regular basis, refresh technology. What we're trying to avoid, and it's not easy, is you may remember a few years ago, the new building was Millbury Street Elementary, and everybody talked about it as a newer building, and the technology was 12 plus years old and wasn't working. And they said, how did this happen? Well, it's because we weren't on a regular basis putting monies into refreshing the technology we have.
And when we don't do that, then we're just kicking
And then
that
it
can
just
further
piles
down the
up,
road.
and then we had a
Yep.
significant investment, and I think we've
Yeah,
lived up to our word, and we haven't let that happen again.
Yeah.
But it's not magic. If they don't have money to do it, it doesn't happen.
It happens again. And I think we've also relied on parent organizations in the elementary schools to refresh for Chromebooks and
Yep.
Chrome cards, and we're grateful for that. But we've already we go to that well, I think, sometimes. And I do think,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah,
said.
we're pretty
yeah.
bare bones as it stands with that refresh plan. I think that staff would tell you, be it Chromebooks or iPads, we certainly need more. We
Right.
are getting by with the ones we have, but they're a few years old now. In the world of technology, a few years old often means doesn't work,
Yeah.
unreliable, et cetera.
Right, yeah, and actually, I'm gonna give even though Bob said the antidotes, and I agreed with that statement, I'm just gonna share a story that happened in my family this week. My husband found my son's science notebook, which is great. They do a wonderful job in the science program, and he's like, so much paper. Like, why aren't you guys on Chromebooks? And my son said, well, the Chromebooks are usually in our social studies class because that's where we do the most research, so we can't have them in the science class. So they're sharing, the students, it's
Yep.
over 100 students, are sharing the Chromebooks for one class where it could be used for so many different things. And that's just a tiny example, but it
Yeah.
almost illustrated just a point it was just I could see a light bulb go on a little bit,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
It
The
Still,
paper's bad, and in some
Right.
ways we need it and all of that, but it just,
it's still more of an event.
It's an
Technology is
event,
more of an
right.
event than really embedded, where teachers have that option to have
Right.
numerous resources that are dependable, newer, and they work on hand.
right.
So
I know
long
that
story
was-
short, having a reduction to tech it's kind of one of those kind of invisible cuts, but it does have an impact.
Yeah. Yes. Good, okay. So we're gonna really dive in on the 28th.
The 28th, we'll have that full book. You'll have it obviously before the
Yeah.
28th. The focus will, a lot of the pages won't, grants won't change because we have to reduce by $1 million, but we'll go over my recommendations, get feedback, and then, go forward. The next phase is a little tricky because you start getting to actual individuals, and it goes from, theoretical, big picture, you look at 25, that could be anybody, but 21 in the next couple months, we need to know exactly who that is and what the impact will be, and obviously communicate to him or her in a timely manner so that he or she can know what could potentially happen and look if needed.
Yeah. Which kind of piggybacks on our previous discussion and.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if it's the right time to ask this question, but, so March felt too early to that group. May feels quite late for your purposes. Is that true, or?
Yeah, terrible answer, but any way you slice it, it's far from. I could come up with a pro and a con for each. If it's in earlier in May, that obviously helps us. Last time we went through this, we didn't have the actual vote until June. I think it was June 6th or
June
14th.
yeah.
I mean, that's super late. That really was, thankfully it passed and it made a tremendous difference. But timing-wise, that was brutal. If we have the conversation, say, early April, I would still fully expect and support whomever it is, the educator, to go and look for a position, and we'd be as supportive as possible. It would help to be able to pair that discussion with, obviously, assuming everything moves forward, if we know May, whatever, 15th, there is going to be an override vote, and we are going to know one way or the other in a month. That could, for a person, still look, but maybe not go into full gear. I would understand if they did and they secured a job and that's our loss, but that's better than it was before, where mid-June, I'd say you're crazy. I would not recommend that they wait until June 14th to find out. And thankfully it worked out, but we did lose some staff that year. We just did.
It's also just not a great feeling.
No, yeah, horrible. Yeah, but not talking to the people. Everybody thinks their position's up there. That can be, it's just not good for morale. It's just not good for any district. So we're trying to be as human and proactive about it as possible. But it's a little tricky if we haven't had those conversations. This is where you kind of get stuck on the 28th, where I want to talk to you guys and be as transparent and have as many specifics as possible, but we haven't talked to the people either.
Right, we can't
So
have them.
we'll figure it out, but that's always a little challenging.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you for this, that was
You bet.
helpful. Appreciate it.
We fill out 51 pages.
We can go line by line. And thank you both for all the work that you've done to prepare for those TRICOM committee meetings. And just for people to know at home, at our first TRICOM committee meeting, there was a bunch of questions asked by the select board. We did put together a packet. It is online on the Grafton Public Schools page under the Finance tab. You can, under the 2020 budget, it's a lot of clicks, but you can get there and you'll see a nice packet that Jay and Dan put together. So feel free to look at that. That answered a lot of their questions, if you might recall from, I think it was our December 19th meeting.
Yep.
And actually, while I'm plugging our website, it's a really great resource. Most of the information is there. Our preliminary budget book, which is now out of date, is up there, but it's you can take a look at it if you just go to our Grafton Public School website. We have a little bit of housekeeping to do. We need a representative for the IPC. That's the capital, I don't know what the I and the P stand for.
Capital
Thank you.
Improvement Planning Committee.
Whew, I should know that. Capital Improvement Planning Committee, they had kind of a meeting in December, and we needed somebody, so Jake put out a call, and Amy very graciously volunteered. She was on the Capital Improvement Planning Committee bylaw committee over the summer, and I think she's found a passion for it. Anyway, I will still, I guess, open it up. She went to the first meeting, but if there's anybody who wants to make a case, if not, we need to officially vote Amy in. So I need a motion.
Make a motion to have Amy Marr as the CIPC school committee representative.
I second it.
All right, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Amy, do you accept?
Sure.
All those in favor? And thank you, Amy. We appreciate your service to that committee. It's a very important committee. I was kind of excited to see that there might be some room in the override for capital. We didn't really get to discuss that, but
Yeah, I have questions.
I'm sure, yeah, we do. And then,
That's good, because you learn a lot there.
where the most exciting thing the Grafton School Committee does all year long, where people are,
Maybe my least favorite.
my least favorite, but the one that gets, sadly, the one that gets the most comments,
People need vacations,
the
come on.
most questions. Yes, but let me give a plea. This
Yes.
is longer lasting. No, we have a calendar. I'm going to make a statement before. Next year, 2021 is a challenging year. There's some weird holidays. We have an election year for the president, so we have an extra day off. Things fall on strange days. Labor Day is late. So I think this is our best thinking on what makes a reasonable start time and a reasonable end time before snow days, which we can never predict. So it's a little bit different, and we appreciate people's flexibility and patience with us, but it's just a strange calendar year. So anyway, Jay had put it out. I don't know if you guys have any questions, if you feel comfortable voting on it tonight, if you have any changes that you want to make and bring it back next time. I'm open to whatever people want to do. I do know people have been asking me since October, because it's such a weird September, on when school's going to start. So
I just have a couple questions, like the election day, have we ever done that before, like
Yeah.
taking it off?
Yeah, for the
I can't remember.
presidential.
for presidential, we
Yeah.
have it's just
Yeah,
Easier.
we can barely make it work with the
Yeah.
town elections
Right.
that aren't even that big.
That is true.
It's a real
it's a challenge.
parking brutal.
I have strong feelings. I mean, I also feel like it's a safety issue. We're having so many people in the building. I know they're not going, but I've always been very against having school on election day, just because it's like, I know Franklin doesn't. I don't know. I'd love it if we could move elections out of the schools and put them someplace else.
I said the same thing.
And then one last one is for having the Wednesday off before Thanksgiving. I know there were, at one point we had that as a half day.
It happened once.
Is that just something that is preferred by the
Yeah.
faculty and families, or?
I think it was
I'm
that
just trying to
and
think as
attendance.
we're getting to the end. Okay.
I think that's when the initial, I want to say it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I could be off
People
on that.
hated that.
But
Yeah. We did
got
that.
it in, but nobody no, I shouldn't say nobody came, but the numbers were the attendance was exceptionally poor.
I'm just saying, as I look out the last day of June.
Yep, you could look at that day, you
That
could
was
look
kind
at
of what I was
the
looking at, of where could we,
the
Right, and
December
we-
holiday
Oh,
break,
yeah.
you could do that 23rd if
no,
you
I didn't say,
chose.
I didn't choose that one.
Well,
We
I mean,
originally had the
that-
21st and 22nd,
those
and
are-
we cut those out because
those are
that
probably the
seemed
two.
long.
Right,
I mean, I think this is just
best case. we
because
come
it's
up.
such a weird, and I just want to stress it, it's a strange year. So
Well, Labor Day is really late.
Labor Day is really late, but then if we start it super early, and we're changing back, I hope just for this 1 year, back to a 4 and a 4 rather than the 3, 4, 5, which I know people tell me all the time how much they like that. But like 1 year, we can be flexible, and then moving conferences into December. We did have some in November this year, which I also heard that people really like, but then we'd have
No school November.
right. We'd have so many days off. I mean, it's the same. We have no school.
It would be
in
six,
December
it would be
either.
6 days off in November if we had conferences in there. And I get that it's not ideal for the middle school and high school on the quarter system to have to wait until December to have those conferences, but at the same time, I feel like just for 1 year, I don't know. What's your sense, Jay? Is it gonna be,
I think it's gonna be fine.
I think it's gonna be fun too.
We're talking
think
about
if they wanted to have
in
a
essence, a
conference, they
week.
can.
Well, I was,
Week and a
yeah,
half.
if a parent wants to meet with a teacher, they can do that outside of that conference system, and I hope that they would if a student is experiencing challenges.
Yep, and they do.
That would be a situation that parents would work directly with teachers, but I do like that, we're preserving the Wednesday professional days for the most part, which I think it's great to be consistent for parents who work. It's just easier for them to know which day. And while I would like to see us, I'm probably the minority, I'd like to see us have school the 23rd of December, I also realize that if the kids are in school and they're not actually learning anything, then that's actually a lost day. So let them out the 22nd after their, classroom parties and whatever. And yeah, June is a little late, but I don't think it's that much later than it has been. I went back and looked, and I think it was like, was it 5 years ago we had a similar situation? It wasn't quite as weird, but it was very similar, like 5 years ago.
Seen some weird calendars.
So.
Everybody will be all right, I think.
Yep.
We'll do the best we can, and people make their decisions that they need to do as well.
Yep.
Okay, so do you feel, can I have a motion then?
I
I
moved
make a
to,
motion to accept the calendar for 2021.
Very good.
second.
Great, nice job. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Excellent, all right, and so you'll get that on the internet?
Tomorrow morning, we'll put it on the front page
Tomorrow
of the
morning.
website.
Front
Tomorrow
page.
morning?
I might be already broken
I said
on,
maybe tonight.
GraftonPS.org.
on
Love to tell you I knew
certain
how to
news
do that, but I
outlets
don't.
that are here. There we go. So thank you for all your work on this. I know, again, I'll
Labor
say
of
it a
love.
third time, it's a challenging year.
It's very colorful.
Yeah, but
Something.
the
I've
most
looked at it
important
so
thing
many
is
times.
the education of our students. Okay, and next is, when we met with the select board, in December, I think it was, Donna Stock raised a great question about facility rental rates, and we thought about it, and we hadn't discussed it in a few years. So Jay put together some great information. I'm gonna turn it over to him to present that.
Yep, as you said, there was a request for information from the committee. As you know, school or facility rental rates are very much tied to policy. So this information and the discussion tonight could proceed. If you were to make changes, it would come back in the form of policy that has the rates in it. So what I put together was, I guess it was a 7-page summary, if you will, for you. I reviewed the fees that we currently have. I provided a comparison to Westboro, and I provided some recommendations for consideration. In a very general sense, about 75%, actually 74% of our facility rentals, so that's classroom space, cafeterias, gymnasiums, our fields, goes towards town-affiliated groups. You may remember, and the bulk of that being at the high school. But going back to when we built the high school, that was a big area of, or a big focus of discussion, was if we're going to put all this money into this brand-new facility, let's make sure that we really do use it wisely with the community, with as little cost as possible, and we have done that, I think, exceptionally well. The town-affiliated groups, those are the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, our recreation department, that's our #1 user by far, all of our town sports, Apple Tree Arts, and that 26% of other groups, and we do charge those groups to make profit, if you will. We bring in about $80,000 a year in terms of profit. Those are largely camps, summer camps, sports camps that might be after school or on the weekends. We have tournaments, usually sports related, gymnastics, especially at the high school. You see that. You see it like judo or karate, that type of thing. And dance recitals are huge. And again, almost all of the rentals for the dance recitals are focused on our high school auditorium. We won't focus on it tonight, but for outside groups, our middle school auditorium is basically unrentable. It might be a default. If somebody's in a real jam, you're going to the middle school auditorium. We talked last year, in the ideal world, I'd love to be able to start putting some money into refurbishing that auditorium to be able to rent it and make money. right now between the seats and just, you've been in there. You're not paying money to rent that space. So it's almost all at the high school. We break even, and that's the goal with town affiliated groups. We're really only charging, like say somebody needs, Girl Scouts need classroom space in an evening where we already have custodians there, we're not charging anything. If it's an event over the weekend that we do need to call somebody in, they would pay just for that cost. So I talked about $80,000 being brought in. That's offset with roughly $40,000 worth of salaries that go to the payment of custodians, maintenance, what have you. If they need somebody for tech, we have an individual who will come in over the weekends or in the evenings and work with the groups to make sure they can have a PowerPoint, the lighting in the auditorium, et cetera. So actual profit is annually about $40,000. In terms of my recommendations, and these obviously, it's just my thinking, I'd like to simplify our grouping into town affiliated. Those are the groups that I talked about, and then have a separate designation for other groups. Those are largely for-profit, non-town affiliated groups that come in from the outside. I'd like to increase the custodial hourly rate on Sundays and holidays by $4 to be more in keeping with what we're actually paying now. We haven't messed with or adjusted these rates for at least 5 years. I think at the very least an increase in hourly rates for, again, those other groups, so not the town affiliated groups, by $5 an hour across the board, and require a 4-hour minimum for the other groups using the CAF, auditorium, and gymnasiums. That's because the custodial contract for Sundays and holidays mandates 4 hours. Like, you can't call somebody in to be less than 4 hours. So as long as we're charging for the 4 hours, it doesn't matter to us if the karate group wants to just run for 2 hours, but they're going to pay for 4 because that's what we're paying those custodians. Does that make sense? Okay. And then and just lastly, with comparison to Westboro, they do have the artificial turf fields. They have, I think our auditorium is newer, our classroom space is newer at the high school, but I've been over there. It's a very nice auditorium. I think it might be a little bit larger. But I used Westboro because they are comparable in terms of the spaces that they have. And I left out the fields. They don't rent out their fields at this point to outside groups. I think they just put them in maybe last year, the year before. So I don't know if they just want to keep them pristine or they have too much use already on them. I'm not sure, but they don't rent out to outside organizations. And with that, I can take any questions you might have.
Jen?
Did you figure out what the cost would be if everything was somewhat the same, how much it would increase with
No.
this?
I didn't. Do you have any idea if we add another?
I could run some calculations.
We can look at it.
Sorry, what are you
It's
asking?
tough because
With
it's
the
so.
with the new
like what
rate,
the
how much more
$5
would it bring in?
do.
Oh, how
It would
much-
definitely, obviously, not rocket science. It would be an increase.
I was just wondering if you knew
Maybe,
what that
because
number
if
was.
some
hard in
organizations can't afford to pay, then they won't rent from us at all, and that could cause us
I
to.
said with it just all being the
Yeah,
same.
with everything being the same.
Just, I was just wondering, that's all.
Yeah, it would certainly be minimal.
I had a question. When would this go, say we approve this, when would this go into effect? So if we had people already contracted, like the dance recitals
Oh,
are
yeah,
probably.
yeah. No,
it would-
any existing contract, if you will, we had in place, we wouldn't touch that. So I'd look at that. We do have a few things that are certainly set in stone, but this is actually a good time to look at it in that we've moved away. It used to all fall on Tony LeMay in Buildings and Grounds, and it was just another piece, and he had to do all the technology stuff, which he made it work, but it was a little rough. We've really worked to streamline our rental process. We now have Our School Today, which is a great piece of software where it used to be very
Clunky.
We didn't have Our School Today, and to rent a space from us was a Herculean effort. Now it's very smooth. We have a point person, John Oren, who's in our tech department, oversees it, works with Tony. We have existing software that we've had for at least 7 years. It's called School Dude, and it works with basically it triggers a rental, triggers a message communication with our custodians and maintenance about what's coming up. People will sign up to work a Saturday, a Sunday, what have you, through this. So we're getting to the point of being very streamlined and very efficient. And John's just been onboarded in this area in the last 2 months. So I think the timing's ideal if we're going to make some changes.
I'm in favor, I'm sorry, Heather.
That's
go
okay. I
ahead.
just have two quick questions. You said raise the hourly rate by $4 to $50 to make it closer. Is it more than or less than what the actual cost is?
That's more than. Yep.
50 is more than. Okay,
Yep.
good.
For the most part, on that given day, we could have a very experienced person.
Sure.
Or we could have somebody who's.
Yeah, but generally we're
Yep.
covered. We're covering
Correct,
ourselves.
yes.
And then do the 4-hour minimum, is there a minimum right now?
No, we don't have that in policy, a 4-hour minimum, but we contractually have that 4-hour minimum.
With the custodians?
Correct.
But when we're contracting with an outside organization to rent it, there's no minimum in place at the moment?
Correct.
Okay.
So we could be losing money.
Yeah, and do you happen to know how long people generally rent for?
Usually for the bigger, the reason we said, like, it probably, sometimes we can make classrooms work. We might have, anytime we can combine two, if we already have somebody there for, I don't know, something in the gymnasium, renting out one classroom for a 1-hour thing is like, that's easy. The building's already open. We specified auditorium, cafeteria, and gymnasiums because those tend to be more bigger events and more in-depth setup. So it's pretty rare that they're going to
Be less than
do
4
2
anyway.
hours.
Yeah.
4 hours is pretty standard.
Okay.
I had a couple questions. Do we own the Marley flooring?
No
Or do we
idea.
rent it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you had brought that up.
Yeah, we own
Own
mine.
it, and I
We own
think
it, okay.
We did at least
We bought.
originally.
Theater,
we
I
did,
think,
yeah.
paid for the repairs of it out of some of their money.
Okay.
That's that black flooring.
We bought.
Right,
we
that
bought
seems
it
to
a while
come up
ago.
all the time.
Right,
In
well,
the
'cause
last
they-
week, I'm
that's the
getting a
thing is
crash
it-
course in
Well,
it.
it gets used a lot by our outside, I'm sorry, I don't wanna jump in, go ahead.
No, I'm curious, because
Well, I'm just thinking when we have people wanting us to charge our own kids in our schools fees to use athletics, and we're having outside, and I mean, my kids use it on the other groups, I wanna say, instead of the non-affiliated, coming in, and there's wear and tear on things, like I would be more in favor of raising this by a little. It's not a big fee jump, $5 an hour is not, if it's another extra $20, I mean, it's not a huge amount of money here.
But you could definitely
I'm in favor of it because, like, I'd rather charge them than our own kids, at least first. And I do think even though, and I was thinking about it, and I was part of the discussions, and we all were, I think, when the new high school was built, and I know we all want the town to use it, but again, there's wear and tear, and then it's coming back on our kids and out of our budget to pay for youth sports, for instance, which obviously I want them to use. So I would at least look at our other groups to increase fees, to try to bring in a little bit of extra revenue and answer those questions before I would charge our own kids, I guess is my.
yeah, I'm in favor of that. I
Sorry,
just
and I
I
totally
just wanted to
interrupted you.
know if so we're charging $200 to use the Marley flooring, which has to be set up by our staff, I assume.
Yes.
And then it has to be stored appropriately.
Right.
And that flooring is quite expensive. My understanding is it's thousands of dollars to replace. So is there any sort of contingency if it were to be damaged beyond repair? Is there any way
I mean,
to
they
have
have
that?
to have insurance with us. I mean,
Okay.
If it was significant, they have to go through that process.
But at some
That's
point, wear
formalized.
and tear will dictate it needs to be replaced.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
You're right.
No, I did try to rent once, and we had, it was, when I fill out the form, it asked for insurance.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
that's-
Oh, yeah,
anytime,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
worst
I
case,
was more
we'll
thinking
probably-
in terms
Yeah,
of
I know
like,
what you're saying,
if like, God forbid, if there was a concert and they moved the risers onto the Marley by mistake, or, and they ripped it, there's only so much you can do to repair that.
Right.
It is a self-healing material, but if you rip it for good, it's ripped, and that's it. So, yeah. No, I'm in favor of it. I just was curious.
Yeah, that's good questions.
So
So the seasonal rental rates, because this came up specifically at that tri-board meeting, I guess we'll call it. There was a statement that, we're charging per season what other districts charge per use for our fields and our gymnasium. And it doesn't seem like, at least compared to Westboro, that's the case. So you're comfortable
Yeah,
leaving it at
that's-
75 a season? Or is that someplace that we could make a little bit more?
I'm trying to think of which one.
Yeah,
here.
I think the $75. It's been in there for a while, but I'm not even sure if we charge anything. That's like I'm think that's for like youth sports or
Yeah.
things like. I think that's what that was for.
It's like you're talking like if another town came, so not Grafton softball because they're considered town affiliated, but let's say Millbury's fields were too bad and they couldn't use them and they wanted to use our field for a season.
I'll look at that. I don't think we have any. I know we don't have any.
Yeah, it just seemed low.
We do it hourly. Let me look at that. I wouldn't. If that, I don't think it's the case. If we are actually doing that, I would be opposed to it. But I don't think we are.
Okay.
I'm wondering if that almost got topped. That on page 4, that's right from policy. I'm wondering if it just got replicated. Because that just doesn't make sense. The nominal $75 seasonal rental rates for town-affiliated groups up top, that makes sense. And as Dan said, I don't think we're not sending Grafton Youth Soccer, in reality, a bill for that $75. We do have a great relationship with all of, I think I put it in here. I couldn't be happier with the relationship that we have. I've been to other districts where even the town groups like abuse the fields. They just trash everywhere. We have a fantastic relationship. We have had times, you might remember, I think it was 2 years ago, we had patches of the artificial turf becoming loose, and we don't have, it's out of warranty. We had to put some monies into it. They contributed to that. Things with soccer, if like one of the nets rip, they could just cross their arms and say, when are you guys fixing? That's not how they are. Like it's been a great give and take. They definitely contribute more than $75 per season. But I'll look at that for town affiliated and other groups.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And then we'll bring this back on the 28th, I guess?
So, right, we'd have to at least have a talk with the policy subcommittee, even
Yeah.
if electronically, but
Yeah.
we can't,
Yeah.
it is tied
Yeah.
to policy.
Yeah, we've been a little, we've been busy doing other things, but we can pull that together.
In all, not whining, but I've been busy with a lot of budget stuff too.
Yeah.
I'd like
What?
to, well, we have. We will sit down. I did sit down with Tony LeMay, but I talked about John Oren, who's doing a lot
Yeah.
of the tech. I'll sit down with him and just see if there's anything we're missing. So we'll come back, and it might be even more robust. I can look at your question about the field use.
Great. Okay. So the 28th
If you
or
think
the
of
meeting
more,
after.
just let me know.
Okay.
I'd like this to go, I mean, this might be an inappropriate request, but I'd like this to go out to the public so that they can see what we're looking at and get comments if people want, because we didn't show it on the screen for the public to see.
Yep.
Right now, it's an internal document.
Yep.
But I want to show that, we are making strides toward increasing revenue, even though that is not a goal of the district. It's something that we're doing in good faith, and
Yep.
I think it's appropriate and reasonable to look at those rates, and I think it's fair, and thank you guys for looking at that and doing all that research, and
Our pleasure.
I think it's great.
And I think also that idea of the potential increase that Jen mentioned, as far
Yeah.
as like if everything stayed the same with
Yeah.
new rates.
Yep, and we'll look at obviously 10, 15, 20, we can give you a bunch of options. The 5, there was 0 science behind that $5. I think we're fairly competitive.
But West, I mean,
right
we should
now-
be more so.
Right. But we also, what Amy said too, do we want to do a jump right away? I mean, we can always look at this again. We could do it on
Oh,
a
yeah,
yearly,
no,
like,
right.
we could make it a practice that things will rise. I don't know if I want to double it overnight or anything either.
Once right now is good.
Yeah,
Yeah. But that's the thinking. I'm not married. My recommendation with the $5,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
think
it
there should be
seems-
something that's somewhat nominal,
Right.
but
not going to break where they want
yeah.
to look
And is
elsewhere.
that
'cause
10,
we
is it
still
15?
support our communities and we
Mm-hmm.
want them to come, and it does make, as I think was brought up in that first meeting or when we went to FinCom, how the schools are the heart of our community, and these kind of activities at the schools really are a wonderful part that we can offer. And
It's been very
yeah.
positive.
So, and I love that you have a great relationship, and I wouldn't want to lose that either,
Yep.
because that's important. So, but at this hard budget times, we have to look at everything. Okay. Anything else? Okay, and we have collaborative update.
Yep,
right? You have-
very quick. I provided information from Assabet Valley Collaborative in the to you, I think it was last week. In a very brief summary, Assabet Valley Collaborative is looking to expand space. They have evolution program at Shrewsbury High School, and Shrewsbury High School can no longer can't accommodate them space-wise, so they're looking to lease some space. So that's something we're working on. And then our Southern Worcester Educational Collaborative, as you know, they're engaged in a search for an executive director, and they've had initial interviews, and they're hoping to have an appointment by February. That's it.
Great. And then school committee member reports. Anybody have any?
Oh, my word.
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. I've been to many, many meetings.
How's the sustainability committee? Have you guys met?
Yes. So the Grafton Sustainability Commission, we are moving forward. I met with Dan the day after Christmas.
Wow.
Rock star. I had a couple of members of the committee come with me, and we picked Dan's brain for 2 hours.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
I hope you brought him like.
No, just my smiles and appreciation and stupid questions. We are in the process of completing our benchmarking against the districts that we've selected, which I once again do not have in front of me. We are moving toward having a final report at some point later this year. It's not going to be when the select board wanted us to have it, which is tomorrow.
Oh.
So that's not happening. But we are continuing to do research. We're comparing against districts. We asked Dan lots of questions and how to ask those questions to other districts, because we're the most transparent district in terms of how much information we actually have online. So it was very easy for the education half of the commission to go onto our budget book and pull all this data out. It's like pulling teeth with some of these other districts. So it's not been as easy as we thought it would be. But we are going to be making a final push with a final questionnaire to those districts. Dan's going to get us contact information. And we should be finishing up that part of our work, the data gathering, I'm hoping by the end of this month. And then the report writing hopefully should begin.
Wow.
So it's been really interesting. I learned at our last meeting how to put together a municipal budget, which is very different from putting together a school budget. And I was fascinated by the process. So it was Mark Haddad gave us a seminar on how to put like what are all the factors. And now we understand all of those words like levy and, how it works and all the risks involved. So we have a greater appreciation, I think, for how difficult it is. So it's been
Thank you. Sure,
it's been
Tim
a
would like to hear that. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's not as easy as, forecasting's a whole other thing. But what I've learned so far is that in many ways our district is doing a lot better with less than our peer districts, which should not come as a surprise to anybody in this room. I'm looking for what else we can do, and I'm not finding it, and I'm finding that a little frustrating.
I'm glad, actually.
I'm glad, but at the
I
same
would
time,
be.
it's like, isn't there something? Like,
Fees. There's athletic
Fees.
fees, Amy.
we have not, we didn't do that because we'd already done it with school committee. It'll
And my head would
probably,
explode. Would be Laura's.
it'll probably be in the report.
It's going to have to be.
But and we didn't look at facilities either. That wasn't something that, nobody asked about that. But they are asking about, what percentage we spend on administration versus, other things and faculty and, it's the same questions. Just hopefully when we put it all together with the municipal stuff, I think it's going to paint a fairly good picture of what we're doing well as a town.
That's great.
So,
Good. Okay. Anything else?
no, I don't think so.
Thank you. You're like the subcommittee queen, so we appreciate all your work. I went to a tri-board committee on January 14th. No, I'm just kidding. I did have the pleasure, I don't know if we were back since the fall play, but I went to see the fall play at the high school, which was fantastic. I've had the pleasure, I think all did, of seeing several holiday concerts. This past weekend, I got to see Millbury Street School and North Street School sing and play. The bands play at the Railers game. That was very exciting. And the Millbury Street music teacher, Laura, and I'm blanking, what's her last name?
We'll go.
Legault, thank you. She sang the Canadian national anthem.
What?
It was amazing. I do have it on video.
That's awesome.
For the whole stadium, and I guess she does it a lot. She was phenomenal. So well done. Thank you to our music departments. And last night we got the late choral concert, because it got snowed out, and, which really worked in my benefit because I wasn't going to get to go because we had a school committee meeting, and it was also lovely. So it's just, we've had a wonderful couple months of great arts through our school, and I know we've had some amazing work from our kids as well. I keep reading about it, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you're gonna touch on that. And I do want to mention, I told James and Tyler not to come tonight, although I think the first meeting would be helpful for them. There were so many people, and it just seemed overwhelming, and because of the late hour, so we appreciate them. They'll be back in a couple weeks. We can get an update from them, but we didn't forget about them.
In terms of student recognition, on the 28th, with the committee's and the chair's permission, I'll set up maybe a chunk of time, maybe like 15 minutes. We can't have everybody that has done great things over the past 2 months, but I've already been in touch with a few individuals in small groups that want to come in and talk about we had some academic achievements. We had our Special Olympics bocce tournament with a couple of their reps said they wanted to come in.
Awesome.
That was through school council, fantastic in Westboro and Walpole this past Saturday. So just a few things on the 28th. I wish we had more than 15 to 20 minutes, but we'll do a lot with it.
Time, can we hear from the Bolts?
I was just gonna say.
Yeah, I've got them scheduled for the 28th.
Yeah,
I didn't count
that's
them in
what
the
I do.
15 minutes,
Oh, okay.
but
Yep.
they're already coming.
Yeah, I'm in.
Nature's Classroom, are they coming too, or are we putting them off until later?
Right now, I haven't responded because we've still got this pile up. My
Yeah.
worry is,
I
you
mean-
guys tell me.
Yeah, it's up to you guys. I mean, we've heard, Jen and I have heard because they come every year, but if you really,
Well, I feel bad because the kids have already been selected.
I know.
So they're excited to come, and I feel like
Realize that.
yeah, I
even
knew
if
that.
even if we
Yeah.
wait until March, like
I'm happy to have them come in.
We
I
can
mean,
have them just.
as much as I could have
Quick.
kids here, I would have our whole meeting if we could. I mean, I'm very proud of our district. We do a lot of amazing things, and I would love to promote more of the great things. So I'd love to have them come
Okay.
in.
Consider it done.
Are we doing the budget? That's the 6:30, is that first?
Oh,
no,
it-
that's
it-
not,
it's-
that's the
No,
February.
11th. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All
we'll
right.
make sure that the meetings, we'll try to be as efficient as possible, but we do have a backup, so we'll have to be a little more patient and.
yeah, I don't mind waiting till March. I just like I said, the kids have already been
Yeah.
selected,
I
so I
didn't
feel a
realize
little
that
bad.
part.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
One of them's my child.
Oh,
Just,
one of them's my child's best friend. So
Pressure.
yeah, no
That
pressure.
changes everything.
It wasn't
I didn't
because he
realize
was
the
my
kids knew.
child.
No, me
actually,
neither.
but he did get selected.
And
he
then,
was excited.
sorry.
No.
Just that NESDEC enrollment report that
Oh,
we
yeah.
keep talking about, but we don't
Yeah.
really talk about it. And I don't think we're probably going to talk about it right now. But it's been since we received it. It's been on the front page of our website. I haven't received any questions about it.
It's very detailed, so.
It is very
it's a lot.
detailed. Basically outlines our enrollment expectations for the next decade. We're going to see an increase, most likely of about 7%. So a swing from what we expected to our new reality is about 270 kids over the course of 10 years. So again, it's not complete overwhelm, but the trend, instead of going down, is going to be going up. Yeah, and that's it.
but that's slow, right? That's relatively slow.
Yeah, it could be.
7%
The
over 10
biggest jump, I was looking at it again today, it was 21 to 23 is the biggest jump. That made up maybe 5% out of the 7 was in those years, so. It'll be interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I think because it's not like backbreaking.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, that might be something, maybe you
it's out
write
there.
up a brief memo and make sure Tim is aware of it and his team,
Yep, I can.
just for transparency. So future agenda planning, I we just talked a little bit about what's coming up. I did hear back from Tracy Novick. I had reached out to her regarding social media. She was very open to meeting with us. I didn't commit to a date yet just because I wasn't sure what our tri-committee meetings were gonna be yet. And she's going into superintendent search committee, meetings for, she goes for different districts and helps them, not for Worcester. So I'll try to narrow down some dates for her, and then hopefully we can match them up with us. I think especially with the override coming up and what a forum social media is, I think it'd be very important for all of us to kind of just get a refresher. And anything else you'd like to see?
So on the draft that's dated 7/9/19, it still says the 21st of January, but I'm assuming that that's now the 28th, and we're leaving
That is.
February as is.
Yeah, that was, remember,
Okay.
we had to move that 21st because we didn't have the room space, so we kind of messed everything up, and, yeah.
Are we still, are we still on track to start school reports February 11th, or do we need to move them
No,
down?
it will be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We always have a snow day with those, I feel like.
Yeah.
We've already had
Yeah.
two.
Yeah. So,
I thought we had 3.
yeah, well, we had 3, but only 2 that affected meetings.
Okay.
Okay, good. Well, if you think of anything, feel free to reach out to.
Oh, CPAC. Any movement on them coming in?
No.
Okay.
What about revisiting sports and activities
that's the other
fees?
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, Jay and I keep talking about that, and when we really need to do it. And when would you guys like to put it on the agenda?
I think we need to have another discussion,
Yeah, I'd like to hear.
and
yeah,
then another meeting, we would vote if we're gonna do it.
Right.
So we need at least 2.
If we did, when do you start putting things out? When do people need to know? Like, when do we start collecting payment for like buses?
May.
Yeah, buses, we start collecting like May or June.
Okay. I know it's early.
I'm not sure when they
But-
start collecting for like sports, or I mean, like even just assembling rosters, like, I don't know when they start registration for sports.
That's until the end of June, but, or like May, June, but I was saying, but we also, that would also affect the parking fees if we
Possibly.
went that route.
Possibly, yeah.
Could.
Sure.
affect the parking
And you
fee.
need time to develop
process.
protocols with the athletic director, if, like, there needs to be time for you guys to plan your processes. So we can't wait until July to do it.
Right. I think February 26th, that right now, that was the placeholder for like snow days.
Mhm.
Okay.
But that 26th,
To discuss it or
Now-
to vote? So would we vote,
I
discuss it?
would, I
then-
would say discuss it,
Okay,
and then March 10th.
okay.
Okay.
Love it. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, no, I've brought that up to Jay like several times, and clearly it's a sore spot for me. But we should absolutely discuss it. Anything else? Okay, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. November 12th, I guess, that was our last meeting.
Make a motion to approve November 12th, 2019 meeting as written.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, motion carries 4-0. And then we have the one from the joint meeting.
I don't see it.
Is it on the,
No, it's in here.
It's
just
in
I'm
here,
not-
yeah.
I don't see it right now in the,
on the drive? That's why.
here it is.
I like it in print.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from December 18th, 2019 from the school committee select board joint meeting as written.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, all those abstaining? Okay, motion carries 3-0-1. And we have a financial report. We have warrants. That was just it. You don't have anything.
No, that's right.
Just warrants,
Just the
right?
warrants, yep.
You're still doing the
We
transfer.
have 2 warrants? Yeah, 2
Correct.
warrants. I'll take a motion when you guys are ready.
I move we accept, approve warrant article number 25 dated December 19th, 2019, in the amount of $542,170.83.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, motion carries. All right, next warrant.
I move the committee accept warrant article number 28 dated January 9th, 2020, in the amount of $469,915.34.
I second it.
All right, motion made, seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Then we have some budget transfers that we need to do.
I can, I have a memo in your book. I'll walk through that with you guys. So these are all just aligned to how we're spending. Anything, sometimes there's a change since like a year ago when we made the budget. Just try to align that. So the first one is about related to the IDA grant. We were funding a salary out of that grant, but it made more sense so we can maximize Medicaid funding to have a different salary funded out of that grant. So we're gonna move money from out of the grant to fund instead a para salary, and then because of the difference in salary, the rest of it is going to go towards special ed in district transportation, which is also something else we fund out of that grant. So right now that grant funds mostly two salaries and then mostly special education transportation. So then the next item is also related to special education out of district spending. So the Student Opportunity Act is going to be funding, hopefully we'll be getting some funding for out of district transportation. And there's potential that they wouldn't want us to be funding out of district transportation through federal dollars and then also asking to get reimbursed for it through the state. So instead of funding out of district transportation with federal dollars, we're going to swap and fund in-district transportation with federal funds because the state's not offering to reimburse for in-district transportation. So then we'll 100% be paying for out-of-district transportation from our budget and then ask for reimbursement from the state for all of our out-of-district. We want all of our out-of-district transportation spending to be eligible for the reimbursement through circuit breaker. That's being added by the Student Opportunity Act. So it's just it's basically a kind of an even swap. All these are kind of even swaps. So the total budgets are staying the same and just swapping what are we paying out of certain grants. So that's everything to do with grants. There's a few that deal with the salaries where we were paying, we were budgeting for certain salaries and we switched what we were budgeting for. So there's a small one for the central office staff. We've had a lot of movement, changing positions, some people left. So there's a small adjustment for that. There's also the next one, we budgeted for to have one less North Grafton Elementary regular teacher, and then we did need that teacher at North Grafton, but we also had a special education teacher leave, so kind of swapped those positions to make that budget work. And then on the next one, we had in the budget adjustment counselor and FY20 request, and that was swapped for special education teacher that's half, partly middle school, partly high school. So we're just trying to make these budget transfers just to line up to what we're actually spending the funds on. And there's another one, the last one has to do with a teacher that was half North Street and half Millbury Street. And we didn't have that need, but we had the need at the middle school, so that teacher was moved to the middle school, so we're having the budget funds follow that position. So that's kind of a summary of it. If you have any questions you can think of on those as you read through it, or any other questions about the budget, feel free to ask me now or email me. So we would just need a vote to approve the budget transfers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as presented. So can I have a motion for that, unless you have any questions first?
I make a motion to approve the budget transfer. Do I need to say the amount? The $456,247.85. I don't know how to say this, but to align it to the spending changes dated January 14th, 2020.
I will second that.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, Dan. Thanks for being so transparent. We appreciate it. And then we have a transportation contract
Yep.
that we need to approve. And can you give a little bit of background?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've had AA transportation from Shrewsbury for many years. We just finished what we usually do for the contracts. We do a 3-year contract with an option to renew for 2 additional 1-year contracts. So we did that 5 years ago, and we did the full 5 years that was eligible under that contract. We went out to bid in November, I think it was, which is a little early for us, but sometimes advantageous to go out earlier. The bus companies have a little more certainty earlier. They can buy the buses earlier, get better deals on the buses, things like that. We did get some interest from 3 different bus companies, but we ended up only having AA was the only one that actually bid. So we thought we might have a little competition, but so the good thing about it is that AA is not increasing our rates at all for FY21, which is unusual and very exciting for us. We had
As exciting as it gets.
we usually assume to go up anywhere between 50 to 75,000 each year, so that was a help. And then the years going forward, it'll go back to that normal type of increase. And just to let you know, we have 17 buses for K through 12, and that we pay for FY21 in this year, because there's no increase. We are paying $390 per day for each big yellow bus. Just for your reference, in case you thought it was 100 or 500, it's $390 per day. So we have any other information you think you can think of? I can try to answer questions on the bus contract.
Can I ask who the other bidders were?
Yeah, so nobody else bid, but the people that they picked up the bid, and they actually asked several questions about it, and were thinking about bidding. There's Durham, and the other one.
Marlboro.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the other vendor.
It wasn't First
I think it was
Student.
NRT.
Yeah,
NRT.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, they do more. They don't do a lot. I think the closest one is Hudson that they do.
Yeah, that's right.
On a somewhat related note, I read in an MASC communication recently that they are actually pursuing legislation to not require school districts to accept the lowest bid, specifically on transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right
I
now,
saw
we
that.
have to, but
Heard about it.
Yep.
that's been
And
problematic.
I'm sure you know this. It's played out horribly
Yeah.
in many districts. Somebody comes in, they bid a ridiculously low amount and can't deliver.
Right.
Um,
I'm definitely in
it
favor of
worked
that
out.
legislation.
Well, we're only getting one bid, so
Now, yes,
accepting
but
the lowest. I will say, I think AA is has been a very good partner for us. I mean, I
They have.
worked with them so much last year with the, we were trying to research every possible avenue for later start times, and I know anytime there's an issue, they're very,
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
I mean, there's always gonna be issues, and you hear about them more, but I think they're very, we're lucky to have
Yeah,
them.
we
and
hear
they're so
about
close.
experiences from the other districts, and I think we are lucky to have AA.
No question.
So I'll need a vote to, what if we don't approve?
Award
You
the,
can walk.
Okay.
well, we won't have to charge transportation fees.
I know, that would help with our budget.
Wait, no.
But then we're not in compliance with the law.
Yeah.
That would be tricky. Okay. So can I have a motion?
I make a motion to accept the Grafton Public School contract for transportation, from AA Transportation
Second.
for July
yeah.
from July 1st, 2020, ending June 30th, 2023.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, motion carries, and thank you both for doing all that work.
It was all Dan.
to
He
get-
did a lot of work.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Very good.
Great, and no policy, subcommittee correspondence. I did receive one piece of correspondence from the Disability Association committee. They asked if we could come in and present our early ADA findings that we kind of commissioned a self-study. You may have heard, I think we talked about it several months ago. We let them know we're still doing that. That was something we kind of took on our own. We have
100%.
not completed it yet, so we don't want to go in with a half-completed report, and we'll keep them updated, and we'll be happy to come in when we're ready. So they were fine. Well, I don't know if they were fine without, the person I corresponded with said she would let the committee know, association know. Any other correspondence? Okay, and then we do need to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. I'll need a motion for that.
I move to go into executive session under Massachusetts General Open Meeting Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to conduct strategy sessions in the preparation for negotiations with union personnel and to reconvene in open session only for the purposes of adjournment.
I'll need a roll call vote, please.
Yay.
Aye.
Joan Connolly, yes.
Oh.
That's fine. Or opt-in, yes. And we will reconvene in open session only for adjournment. Motion carries. Thank you and good night.